Yeah, all right. So when we get started, what is HMIS? I know that, HMIS does have a lot of terminologies that we use, and I know that can get overwhelming for people. So just as a refresher, HMIS stands for Homeless Management Information System. And basically what that is that is the name of the data management process that HUD has set up to collect client level data and then project as well as project level data about the funding sources and grants that it provides through HUD, which basically means that it's like a giant grant management process. Now, we don't always see it this way, like depending on how you work on it, you may see different pieces where you are working with just client level data, or maybe you're working with just program level data, or maybe you work with a little bit of everything. But HMIS covers that whole group of data. And each continuum of care is responsible for not only selecting a collaborative applicant and HMIS lead, but also the software solution that complies with this data collection management and reporting standards. And for those who aren't aware, it is HMI. The ones that you all are using is Client Track through Covia. So next, another common term that we talk about with HMIS is personally identifiable information, and that's PII. We talk a lot about HIPAA with this as well, which basically what PII is that basically identifying a deformation that is indicative to adjust you. So this would be the information that would either alone or together would allow an individual to know that, but beyond a shadow of a doubt, we are talking about you. So a name, for instance, like Desta or John or Caesar, on its own, there may be 100 or 1,000,000 of those. That alone may not be enough to identify somebody, but Desta Taylor maybe, as well as, and especially when you start pairing that with social security number and date of birth, that would really allow people to figure out that without a shadow of doubt, we are talking about one individual. So, if you hear us talk about PII and, that protection of that is what we are talking about. And I have included links at the bottom of this and on the previous one if you wanted to read more about where this information is coming from. All right. So let's log in. And we're going to go, like I said, we're going to go back and forth quite a bit just because there's some pertinent information with HMIS that we share, as well as, this is a training that is dedicated to the platform and how to use it. So the URL that you're going to use is going to be clienttrack.com/South Dakota HMIS. And that will be your production site, just this right here. And Client Track is a web-based service, so you would be able to, which means that you don't have to log on from a specific desktop to use it. You can log in from any place that you have an internet source, as long as you have your credentials, and you can be able to see that information and access that. Now, because this is a training, I am logging in as the train, and this is the _train site. The training site and the production site are identical. They're going to look and act the same. The main difference is we're not going to have real people's data. In the training site, So since we are recording this and we have people from a bunch of different agencies on there, this just helps us ensure privacy and ensuring that PII is is separate. Now you will notice too, you may notice when I logged on, I'm in Chrome. This is not, while Chrome is usually a best practices option, Chrome does well, tends to have less bugs and less issues with data management software. You can still use Firefox or Internet Explorer or Safari, any web browser of your choice to do that. I just prefer Chrome. So to log in, we're going to, after we've gone to this site, we're going to have a username that we've been given. Typically, that's going to be an email address, and then you're going to have your password. So I'm going to put my password in here. Keep in mind that your passwords will be need to be renewed annually after 365 days. But you can reset it sooner if needed. I'll show you all that when you log in. And if you ever forget your password, if you set up your security question, you'll be able to use this did you forget your password and trigger an automated process to reset your password on your own. And when we log in, I'll show you all how to do that. So once we've put our password in, we're going to select OK, and then you'll see this work group comes up and this organization. This will be the last place that you've logged in, or if you've never logged in before, this is usually going to be your default setting. Most people only have access to one or two, usually SD HMS users or coordinated entry systems, and then they'll have access to one or two orgs. So if you only see one org, that's totally fine. If you need access to other orgs, we do have a process to ensure that you would get access to that if needed. And location, you probably won't have to do anything with, but if basically that's going to be coming in if you have an agency A and maybe you have a local site that like a main checkpoint or headquarters where data can be where like you may be entering data or seeing clients, and then you may have like a mobile site or a second location, and it's important to differentiate between that. Not many people use that, but you may, and it's there in case you ever need it. All right, so when we log in, this is what it will look like, and this is what we call the home space or the user dashboard. And we can see a couple of different things here starting out. We have this side menu over here, and this has some options for us. We can choose to hide that if we want to by clicking that push pin and moving it to the side. For the purposes of this training, I will leave it pinned in place, which means it's not going to move. I do recommend if you're a new user or if you're just getting used to Client Track of using that function, because it will help as a reminder to keep that prevalent in your mind that is where you go to navigate. Although I do use it a lot, like if I'm screen sharing and I've got an Excel sheet open as well as Client Track, I like to close that out and have this larger workspace when I need it. So that's pretty cool. It's still, either way, you're going to have the same experience with Client Track. All right. You'll also notice over here on the side that we have your name. And well, I assure you it will not say Desta Taylor all the time. It will say your name. And you can see that here. And because we are in training, you will see parentheses training after my name. And that means just that we are in training. So if you are doing anything and if you're messing with live client data and you see training, you may want to you may want to keep an eye on that, because you may not need to be entering live data into the system or vice versa. So that's just an easy way for you to tell these apart. And when I go here, I can see the work group that I'm in. and the organization. And I'm going to change this to the SD work group, and I can change this without having to log in and log back in. So I'm going to change that, and I'm going to leave that the same. And the other cool thing I can do here is a theme. And you see you've got the default, which is what we are on now, and then the dark. And if I change that, it changes the skin, what we call the skin of Client Track, which is how you interact with it. This will not impact your experience whatsoever. This is just done for personal preference. I'm going to change it back for the training just because this typically is the one most commonly used, and it tends to be best for videos. But if needed, we can change that. I was just going to mute all attendees again. We had some background noise. Right. The other cool thing that we can do here is if we click on our name and we go to security settings, we can enter our password and set up a security question or change our password. And I am not going to set up my security question again and do that. But basically what you would do here is click on this and you can set your own security password or security question and your answer here and then hit update. So you would be able to do that. It is going to ask you for your password again, just to confirm that that is you doing it. And then once that's done, if you ever log out of Client Track and have trouble logging back in, or you forget your password, you're going to be able to use that forgot my password option to trigger the automated system so you don't have to have Denise or I reset your password, which is a pretty cool thing to do. And sometimes it could just be a pain in the butt to have to wait on somebody to do that. Right. You can also sign out here. We're not going to do that because we're going to be doing our training. And then the other cool thing that we can do here is if we click on this help option, we're going to be able to report an issue. So I know that some of you all have had instances where either you're getting an error message that you're not sure about, you don't know where something is, things are happening that you're not sure of and don't understand why they are happening that way for whatever reason, or maybe you just want to make a suggestion. This option would be at every page, and we can report an issue. And this is going to work just like an email. So when I click that, it's going to say, it's going to have a header or a topic. I can say can't. And just try to explain this the best that you can. Clearly, we don't have any issues going on right now because we're doing a training, but I'm still going to show you guys how to do this. But basically, this will function just like an email. So we can write the body here and explain the issue as much as possible. And just try to the best of your ability to describe the issue as best that you can and give us a little bit more data on what's going on. If you've got screenshots or if you're doing a report, you're able to add you're able to add that here. But the other cool thing that we can do is make sure that, and this is why we say that, is to make sure that like when you're having that issue to put in the help ticket on the form or the page where you're getting the error message or having the issue. because what that does is not only does this send an email to us and put this into the ticket queue, but it also takes a snapshot of where you are in the system. And while this looks like a bunch of gibberish, we can actually read it. And it can give us some more information to help us figure out what's going on with the issue. You've also can put in your contact information down here. This is going to be the best place for us to reach you if we need to regarding the issue. And then you can also add additional people. So say, for instance, Denise and I were both having this issue. Oh, Denise. Let's get new people up. Denise isn't coming up. Okay. But we can add additional people here as well. So I'm going to add Denise. Denise, I know that isn't your password or your username and stuff, but that's okay. And, you know, and we can add a note and submit this. So then that submits our issue, and then it'll also keep Denise notified because, you know, maybe Denise is having the same issue that I am, or maybe Denise is my supervisor that wants me to add, keep her updated of the situation. So that would be a good way that we can do that. Now, how do we keep up with that ticket, right? And how we're going to do that is we're going to go over to the side menu here. And if we come down here to my submitted issues, we can see here that this is where this ticket lives. And this is the first ticket that I have put in for this one, but we are able to view and work with other tickets as well. Your tickets will always save here. They will never leave, which is cool because I know, for example, I worked with Client Track for a couple of years now, and I'll be like, man, I know I put a ticket in about this, and I can't remember the response. So I can go here and check that out and see what the solution was. And if we click on this, we can see that we have our regular note here. If we had any attachments, we could view those here. And then we can also respond. So if I clicked new note, this is going to work just like a ticket or just like an email. So I would be able to write an additional note and see the responses here. And if I wanted to update, attach another screenshot or another file, I can do that as well. And then most of the time, you're just going to select save the note. You are able to select multiples of these. So save the note is just going to do that and is going to save this note on the ticket. Save the note and mark issue as fixed is going to be done just as it said. If the ticket, maybe we realized that we put this ticket in error or we found out what the solution was, we can update the ticket and write that here and mark this as say and mark it as fixed, which means that, you know, there's nothing else that needs to be done. We can also mark the note and assign the issue. This is probably going to be used the least because we are usually Denise or another admin is going to assign the ticket, but that is an option for people. And then the last one is save the note and close the issue. And this means that this issue has been fixed. You've gone in and verified it, and you're just confirming that that issue has been verified. So I'm going to mark this as fixed, and I'm going to save it. And you can see there that my ticket shows up. If someone had responded, it would be in green over here, and then we would have another. So we can see all of that. Is there any questions about tickets or any questions so far, Denise?
I don't see any questions in the chat box.
Okay, good. All right. So I'm just going to go down a couple of these selections here. We have the quick services and multiple clients. If we click on that, this is a service or a function that not many people use, but those that do use it love it because it saves them amount of time. And typically, when you do services, you go to the client page and you've got an enrollment and you're going to add a service and maybe a case note, and it's done in a one-to-one relationship. So you're doing one service for one client. And usually that's fine, especially, if you're doing case management. But what if, for instance, you run a soup kitchen or you run a services only and you have you do a meal and you feed 100 people for breakfast and lunch and dinner every day, right? So it's 300 services that you would have to go to 300 individual client records to document one service, right? And that is a lot of work. The quick services for multiple clients allows you to go around that. So what this is it says that we are providing quick services for multiple clients means that you're providing one service at one time for multiple clients. Now, you will have to have, you will need a couple of caveats for this. So for starters, you'll have to have, everybody would have to be enrolled into the program already that you're going to be providing that service for. They will all have to be getting the same service. So you couldn't add a service, a breakfast and a hygiene kit for, a couple people. And it would all have to be on the same day. Okay. So you couldn't put 2 days on this. So again, you are going to be having one program, one service, and one day. Okay. So we can do this and say food. You are able to set your default units and count. This is going to be similar to when you set up an individual service. And default units is just going to be that numeric count, and then the unit of measure, you can choose dollars, minutes, count, or hours, depending on what best suits the need. For instance, case management is typically done by hours or minutes, whereas a food box or a meal may be done as a count because you're giving one meal or one box of food at a time out, and then you would just select the different numeric values. So, if this were family, we may do 2 counts because we're giving out 2 boxes of food. But for this instance, since we're saying that we're giving out one meal, we're going to do 1 count and 1 measure. We're going to select the location if needed. For this, we're just going to say that it's DSI. And the only ones that are going to be required are these that have the stars in there, okay? Now, we've set up the service, and we can go down here and either choose a client or choose an enrollment. All right, I'm going to select. I'm going to say that Eric got this. Oh. Kind of roguish. And basically what you're going to do is just select the clients that got the service versus you're going to select the person that got the service, and those that have a checkbox down here, we're going to say that they got that. The other thing that you can do too is if you select on program enrollment and say, for instance, as these, we are only providing this to program enrollment. It was going to give us a list of everybody that already has an open enrollment in that program, and then we can just select the ones that are getting the service and then unselect the ones that weren't there. Like I said, it's just going to save you some time to do this because when we hit save, we're going to be performing 5 services at once instead of going into each individual one and doing it. So I'm going to hit save and close. And then if we go over to Jessica Rabbits, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I just wanted to show you guys what this will look like. If you go to her services, you can see now that she has the food service.
And so this is Denise. I think it's important to note here, I know a lot of times, and a lot of you that maybe are on the training today that are using HMIS and have used HMIS, most times you're entering services individually in a client file. But I think this option works well if you maybe do a budget class where a lot of your rapid rehousing and homeless prevention clients are required to attend or need to attend, so you can enter that budgeting class for everybody at one time instead of going into each individual file. And I think the same is true with some of our shelters. If you provide, food boxes on a day for a bunch of different shelter clients or, something like that, you can enter all that in at, together at one time. So it does save some time, I think, in some of those instances. But I do know most of you are used to entering per client specific services into their file. So, but just wanted to point out this is good if you are doing classes or providing a service that you provide to multiple people.
Yep. Yeah, and this is meant, thank you, Denise. This is meant, as just a time saver for you. So if you wanted to go in and if you're doing that budget class and you wanted to enter a service for each individual client, you're welcome to do that. It's still going to save in the same place. This could just save you a little bit of time because you just got to take that program roster and say, oh, I perform this with these people in our rapid rehousing program, and then you could just select that and save it. So it's just going to save you a little bit of time. The next here that you see is most recent, and you're going to see the last 5 clients and the date that you access them. So you can see here, I just was on Jessica Rabbits, and if I click on this would take me to her page, which is kind of cool. Not many people use this, but when they do, it's something that's just really nifty to have, especially if you've been doing enrollments and you log back in and you're like, okay, who was I at before? And you could just come here and click on one of these to do that. You also have a shortcut to files on server. And this we're going to cover a little bit later in the reports, but you are able to have a quick point access this from here. And this will allow you to view and download your exports from the reports page. Like I said, we're going to go over that a little later, but this is on the user dashboard for convenience, so I wanted to show that. All right. Next, we have client case assignments. So a common question that we get is client case assignments, and this person is still open on my page, but they're closed out of the enrollment. And that's totally okay. Client case assignments is meant as a case management tool. And while it is related to enrollments in that you can start and end enrollments through an entry and exit workflow, this is separate. And this is meant to be a case management tool to where you can manage the people that you may need to follow up with. And that you may need to work on, and it works under the premise that there may be times that you have, per the grant requirement, have a 30, 60, and 90-day follow-up, for instance, that you need to still document and do case management services for somebody, but you don't always, but you don't have that open enrollment. So this would allow you to do that. You can see a couple of things here. For her minding, I began working with her on 1/3, but I stopped working with her on 2/1/2019, and I worked with her with my PSH enrollment. So her status is inactive. Whereas you can see here for Bill Hansen, I started working with him on 6/9 in my services only program, and he is active, right? So there are different things that I can do with this. I can add a new case management, case assignment. I can get a report, caseload report, and this would allow me to see those that are active, inactive, pending, and it's going to come up as a aggregate report. So we can run that pretty quickly. You can see here, I've got 2 people, right, that are inactive. And the other thing that we can do here is manage it. So if I click on edit case assignment, I can change that to inactive or pending. I'm going to change his to inactive, and I can put an end date in as well. And just like with all dates in Client Track, you can set the date, and you want to do it for the date that the service was provided, not the date that you're doing the data entry, okay? And then I'm just going to hit save, and you can see there that Bill Hansen's account has been updated to inactive. All right. There's also the by name list that you can view from here. You all probably won't use this very much because you have your own by name list that you use, but it is there in case you all internally are using that. You are able from this page to set up and manage your account information. So if I decided that I wanted to start going by Desta A. Taylor, or if I wanted to start using my married name, I could change that here, and I'm not going to have to ask Denise or myself to update that for us. You can also update your phone number here. This is going to be the phone number that's typically best to reach you at, and this will be the one that auto-populates in your submitted form or your submitted tickets like that. So if you wanted to update that, you're more than welcome to. And you can also add some other information. So if you wanted to add your cell phone or a provider or your work address, I recommend doing that. I don't recommend doing your home address. Not that I'm going to show up or anything, but you know, I don't think we would need that. You can also manage your theme here. So I'm just going to leave this as is and change that to my middle name, but just know that you do have that ability to manage your user information on your own. There is also the ability to change your password, and this is just going to be the same as if you would have done it up here, where you're able to put in your new password and confirm it. You can also update your account information. It's the same as what's on your work group. However, this is simply a shortcut to that. We also have paused operations here, okay? And what you can see here is I do have some completed workflows. And what paused operations are is, say for instance, you are doing a workflow and you're completing an enrollment, and all of a sudden your friend says, hey, guess what, there's cake in the break room. Of course, now it's since a lot of people are working from home, it's probably not, hey, there's cake in the cake room, but hey, my Uber Eats is here. You know, you may need to pause that workflow and get up and go get your delicious food. And if you do that, you are able to come here to to your paused workflows and see that here, and you would have the option to resume it or to exit out of it. And you would be able to manage it from there. So you're not losing that space or that time and that work that you've done. You're able to come there and see it. The other thing that's important about this, and we're going to talk about it a little later with reports, is paused workflows. Even if you go back in and start a whole new enrollment on the client page and do that, you could still have one here. And if there is some data errors on that, they could potentially pull in to your data quality reports for that program, depending on where you are in that workflow. So it's always important to be mindful of these, because especially if you've gone in and redone that and you don't need that anymore, you may want to go in and delete it. Right? And then we have my submitted issues, which I've gone over already. Are there any questions about the user dashboard or anything that I've covered so far?
I don't see any questions in the chat box.
Okay.
So I encourage people, if you have questions, to, go ahead and enter them in the chat box so that we can go over them. And if you want to send the question, you can change the chat box to send the question just to me if you want to, instead of to everyone. But definitely encourage you guys to speak up and ask questions as we're going through the presentation.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Like I said, I try to be very laid back, and I have not ran into a bad question yet. If you're curious about something or uncertain, I highly recommend you speak up, because someone else probably has that same question. Okay. And I've kind of finished talking about the user workspace right now. Even though there is some good stuff on there, a lot of people don't spend a lot of time on that. And especially end users that are doing a lot of are doing a lot of entry and stuff like that. People tend to be spending most of their time on other areas of client track. So this is more, I kind of like to think of this as like client track at the administrative level. Like you may have some news and stuff here that we'll put in. You can see the programs that are associated with your organization, and you've got your my case assignments. But like I said, this is more of like the administrative side of client track, and not many people spend that much time there. So I wanted to now at this point transition back into the PowerPoint and talk again about some definitions that are used, and talk about coordinated entry. Or not coordinated entry. I'm sorry. I keep wanting to call coordinated entry today, or chronic homelessness coordinated entry. It must be Tuesday or something. I don't know, guys. I'm sorry. But just to talk about some more homeless definitions, and to talk about chronic homelessness as well, just because I want to talk about how HUD defines those things, and just some things to clear up. We'll go over a few chronic homelessness ones, instances, and then we're going to go back into client track, and we'll talk about the client space, and this is when we're going to start doing some of the workflows. Okay. So HUD has quite a few definitions that we like to talk about. Some of these you may be familiar with, and some of these you may not. So first of all, we have homelessness, which HUD defines homelessness as a person sleeping in a place not meant for habitation. So this could be sleeping in a car, sleeping on a park bench, sleeping under an overpass, sleeping in an abandoned building. For instance, a building, it may be a house, but doesn't have running water and electricity. Those would be examples of a place not meant for habitation, or it could be someone that's living in an emergency shelter or a homeless shelter. We do have, for HUD, you do have the different levels of homelessness. For people to be considered homeless, literally homeless, it needs to be an individual or family that lacks a fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence, such as has a nighttime residence that is a public or private place not meant for human habitation. That goes back into sleeping under an overpass or an encampment. Is living in a publicly or privately operated shelter designed to provide temporary living arrangements. So this is going to include not only the COC funded emergency shelters, but also emergency shelters that may be privately funded or church funded as well. And is living in an institution where he or she has resided for 90 days or less, or who has resided in an emergency shelter or place not meant for habitation before entering that. Now, this is an interesting caveat with this, because you do have an institution. You do have institutionalized stays that's getting at calculating the total time people have spent homeless. And an institution is going to be places where the person's basic needs are cared for by that entity. For example, a state hospital, a psychiatric hospital, medical hospitals, nursing homes, jail or prisons. These are all going to be examples of institutions where if a person resides there for 90 days, for 91 days or more, they will no longer be considered literally homeless. Okay. They will then at that point be at that stage 2 of, which is unstable housing. Okay. Or, yeah, so they'd be at level 2. Okay. And this is important because when we're about to talk about chronic homelessness. And when we start talking about chronic homelessness, we're going to be talking about episodes and adding up episodes. And if an individual, say for instance, was in jail for 89 days, okay, and they were in an emergency shelter before that 89 days. So at day 0, before day 1, they got picked up to go to jail from an emergency shelter. As long as they are in that jail for 90 days or less, then that entire time would be counted towards that homeless episode because they did not get to a place that broke a homeless episode. Okay. And we're going to go into that a little bit more when we're talking about chronic homelessness on the next slide. But that's an important caveat to get to pay attention to, because this is one of the things that I've found stumps a lot of people. There's a lot of data quality issues around chronic homelessness for that reason. So when I was talking about chronic homeless or a homeless episode, these are separate and distinct sustained stays on the street or emergency shelters. So again, this goes back into this homeless definition. We're going to be adding up and looking at episodes of instances where people were sleeping in a place not meant for habitation or an emergency shelter. And all of these episodes are going to count up to their total homelessness to see if they're chronically homeless. Part of that chronic homeless definition as well is going to be a disabling condition. And disabling conditions are going to be diagnosable disorders that are persistent and long-term. So it's not going to be something that's going to go away like a cold, or how if you've broken your arm or leg, it sucks, but they go away after a time. A disabling condition is going to be like a substance abuse disorder, to where you may be in recovery, however, you are always considered to have that going on, to have that diagnosis. You're also going to be considering things in this as like heart conditions or mental illnesses. So generalized anxiety disorder, schizophrenia, those that are pervasive and long-term are going to be counted in this as well. And then the other definition that I wanted to talk about is the approximate date homelessness started. And this is probably the question that in all of HMIS I hate the most, just because it's so poorly written on measures. And that if you read it, it sounds like approximate date homelessness started. I would think, and I did think before I started reading the definition, is that this is the first time this individual became homeless. And that's not the case. So actually, approximate date homelessness started is the date of this current episode of homelessness. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this when we talk about chronicity, and then I've got some examples to show this. So just have these in the back of your mind. It's okay if you're feeling overwhelmed or a little confused at this point, because that's how I felt when I was first learning this. But approximate date homelessness started, it's actually referring to the current episode of homelessness. Okay. And we'll go into that a little bit more. So, what is chronically homeless? We hear a lot of people talk about chronic homelessness, and we hear a lot of, information that's going on about this. Is this being, something that we look at either at a by name list, or, like maybe you're working with Built for Zero and people are working on getting down to functional zero with this. But, chronically homeless is something that we've talked about a lot. So there are two definitions there are two ways that people can be chronically homeless. One is you have to have a disabling condition, so that is a yes. And you have lived in an emergency shelter or place not meant for habitation for a year or more, right? So that's it. That's it, like yes to disabling condition, and you have either stayed in an emergency shelter or in a place not meant for habitation, or both. So like you live 6 months in an emergency shelter and 6 months in a place not meant for habitation. That enough together is enough to merit chronic homelessness. The other way to get that is to have the is to have a disabling condition of yes, and then to have 4 or more episodes that over the last 3 years, that total amount of time of staying in emergency shelters and places not meant for habitation, that over those 3 years you have 4 or more episodes that equal 12 months or more. All right. So this one kind of gets at how people that are experiencing homelessness are often, by necessity, very opportunistic, and they sleep where they can. So, it's not common for individuals to just sleep outside or just sleep in one place until they're permanently housed. Especially with families and youth, they may sleep on a park bench and then couch surf and sleep on a couple of different friends' couches, or they may have a friend or family member that would put them up in a hotel or a motel for a couple of nights. So there may be all these instances where they may not be literally homeless, and we have to be able to calculate that. Okay. So this is where it's getting into that chronic homelessness piece of it, where you're going to be building and working with individuals to kind of look at we call it episodic chronic homelessness, where you're looking back at where they've stayed for the last 3 years and adding up the total times that they've been in places not meant for habitation and emergency shelters, to see if they've met that 4 episodes over that equal 12 months or more threshold. All right. So we hear us talk a lot about episodes and what breaks a homeless episode. So, we have a homeless episode where an individual is sleeping in a place not meant for habitation or an emergency shelter. And what breaks that? So, I keep talking about this, but what breaks it? So a couple of things that will break it is if a client is staying with friends or family for 7 days or more. This can be paid or unpaid. The client is in an institution for 90 days or more. So, like if they've been in an emergency shelter for 91 days, or if they've been in jail for 91 days, that is going to break an episode. If they've been in for 89 days and they were in an emergency shelter before that, those 89 days are going to count towards their current chronic homelessness status. Okay. And that's the important piece, is that that time is going to count towards that episode. So that, may be a make or break deal if somebody is able to get chronic homelessness status, because once they get that status, other services and other housing opportunities are opened up to them. All right. And then another one that's going to break it is if a client moves into a housing or hotel that's paid for by personal funds. And this can be earned income. So like if they've worked and they've paid for them to stay in a motel for a week, or if a friend or family member or former boss is paying for them to stay there for a week, that is going to count as it breaking personal funds if they've stayed there for 7 days or more. If they've stayed there for under these time thresholds, then that time is going to count towards that current episode if they have it. So it's really important to understand that. Do we have any questions about that, Denise? Hello? Can everybody hear me okay? You all can nod if you can. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Great. For a little paranoid. We had some technical issues on the last call. Thank you for being patient with me. So for now, I wanted to go over. I had some chronic homelessness situations, just because chronic homelessness has a lot of moving parts, like I said, and it can be one of the tougher instances to grasp, and just like a really hard concept for people to work with. So I created a couple of scenarios. We're gonna talk about chronic homelessness, and Denise, you are unmuted. All right. And I tried to set these up in a way that's kind of like how you're going to get them. So usually, when you're doing an intake, it's not that you come in and a client was like, of course, I know the definition of chronic homelessness. These are my homeless episodes. These are not my homeless episodes, and I've already calculated this for you. That's not usually how this works. They're going to come in and it's going to be a conversation. And this is kind of how I set these up. And just a minute. Denise?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, I was trying to talk a little bit ago, but I had to call into my cell phone because my system dropped me through my work system. Anyway, somebody was asking a question if the 7 days has to be in a row. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes. Yeah. So the 7 days have to be in a row. So for example, if I'm staying in an emergency shelter for 3 months, and then I go and stay with my friend for 3 days, and then my friend and I get into an argument. She wants me to pay rent and I can't. So I leave and I go and stay at another emergency shelter, or if I go and sleep under a bridge somewhere, those 3 days are all going to count in that one homeless episode. Okay? That's a great question. I love that. Does that make sense, or do we have any other questions along those lines?
Let's see. We don't have anybody else that submitted a question. That was the only one.
Yeah. Another example of that would be like if I slept outside on a park bench for 2 months, and then I went to a state hospital and I stayed there for 60 days, so 2 months. And then when I got out, I went to an emergency shelter, right? this does not break my episode. So it's going to have to meet those thresholds where you're staying there for 90 days or more or 7 days or more for it to break an episode, okay? So it's going to be the same as if I go to an emergency shelter for 30 days, I sleep on my friend's couch for 2 days, I go and sleep on a park bench for a month, and then go and stay with another friend for 5 days. Because I didn't stay with a friend for 7 days or more, none of those are going to break the chronic episode, and all of that time is going to count, okay? Thank you for asking that, because this is why I wanted to go over stuff like this, because it can be kind of maddening to go through and having to keep up with all these moving parts. So, like I said, I've created these homeless scenarios, and I made these in more of a narrative form, because this is usually how you get the information from a client. And I wanted to go over this, and I want to go over a paper form of like how I gather this information and how I enter it into Client Track. So we're going to go over these. I've got 3 instances. And then when we're done with that, I'm going to show you, I'm going to also bring up this form that I use, and you're going to see how this relates to how we're going to enter this information into Client Track. So the first one is Sam reports, this is going to be the narrative. So like we're going to pretend that, you know, we are, that Sam is coming to our program, and we need to collect his chronic homelessness information. And this is kind of how it comes in, and how we get the information, where it's more of like a check-in, or a narrative, where we're going to have some information that's going to be helpful, some of it may not be. So Sam reports last night he slept on his friend's couch. He's been there for 3 days, but can't stay there tonight due to his friend asking him to leave because he's not able to contribute to bills. He is currently unemployed. Sam reports he may go sleep under the bridge where he slept for the last year until it got too cold to sleep outside. Sam does not like the cold. Before sleeping under the overpass, Sam reports he lived with his sister for 5 years, who drove him to his doctor appointments for regular checkups. So we're not going to be in Client Track right now. So I'm going to close this out. But how I like to do these is to work backwards. So what I will do is, because the questions, when you see them on Client Track, are, where did you stay last night? Okay, so that's where I like to start. So I would ask Sam, and this is how, we did this, is, Sam, where did you stay last night? Okay, and he said, I slept on my friend's couch for 3 days. And that's going to be a friend's house, right? And then before that, Sam says that he slept under a bridge, right? And how long was he there? For over a year. And that's going to be a place not meant for habitation. And before that, he lived with his sister, and he was there for 5 years. So we've gone back. We've gone back through his time, and we've looked at this. And we can see here, as like with the question, Sam only slept on the friend's couch for 3 days, and he was under a bridge for over a year. And this isn't going to break this homeless episode, because he was under a friend, because it was less than that 7 days. So Sam has one homeless episode, because if we go back to where he was last stably housed, this equals 1 time without a break. Okay? Now, if we look at the time, because this current episode, because this is going to not break an episode, and he was in a place not meant for habitation before, this is going to count for over 12 months, okay? Because he was over a year there, and he has that 3 days. And The date the homelessness started is going to be, as I said, when this current episode started. Okay. So since the current episode for this one is going to be when he first started sleeping under the bridge, then this is going to be it. Now, I understand, and your clients are, as you know, HUD understands this as well, is that, your clients being homeless is probably, one of the worst times that they've had. They're probably going to be under a lot of stress. When they've gotten kicked, especially if they've gotten kicked out of places, they may not have the best support system around them, and these may be traumatic instances. So they may not remember, the exact date that they left. And if you look in client track when we're doing this, this is a date. HUD wants this as a date. So what HUD says to do is to get the month and the year, and then for whatever today's date is, to put in that day. So since we are working with Sam today on the 30th, and Sam says, I can't remember what day, but I know it was this time last year was when I started sleeping under the underpass or under the overpass, and I left my sister's. Then we know that like in 619, that was when he was that is when this homeless episode started. And since today's date is the 30th, that is where we would get that number. Okay. And that's what HUD wants is, just to substitute with today's day, the day that's in there. Now, had he slept here for under the bridge for 18 months and we had to add 6 months onto this, then we would do January 30th, 2019. Does everybody understand that?
So we do have a question in the chat box.
Okay.
They're saying, I understand that you are talking about chronically homeless, and them staying at a friend's house for a few days doesn't break their time of homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
But if they go stay at a friend's house for less than 7 days, are they considered literally homeless?
Yes. Because it has to be over that 7 days for that to be level 2. So these instances where it breaks chronic homelessness, these are going to be instances where they would be considered level 2. Okay. So if they stayed with a friend for 7 days or more, or with friends for 7 days or more, family, then that's going to make them level 2, and why they are no longer considered level 1. Same as this, if they are in an institution for 92 days, that's going to take them out of level 1. Or if they paid for a hotel room for 2 weeks, that again would take them out of level 1 and put them in level 2, where they're unstably housed, but they're not literally homeless.
And I think for our agencies that are on the training, so our agencies that kind of are working with rapid rehousing and homeless prevention, so if somebody has been staying with a friend, couch surfing is the term that's used a lot for that, they're coming into, last night they stayed with their friend, they've been staying with their friend for that 7+ days. They come into your program classified as prevention, so they have to meet the qualifications of prevention, I think is maybe where some of these questions might come from also.
Okay. So the next case that I have was Beatrix. And Beatrix reports she slept on a park bench last night. And she has slept there for the last 3 months. She has her arm in a sling. She reports that she broke it when she fell off of a curb. Before sleeping in the park, she reports she slept in a women's shelter for 10 months. And after she got evicted from the apartment, she shared with her partner for 5 years. Amy mentions few of her doctors have diagnosed her with diabetes. So here we have Beatrix, and I interchange the names sometimes. And Beatrix, and this is what we're going to do again. We're going to work backwards from where Amy slept last, or from where Beatrix slept last night, and we're going to collect that. So we have a park bench for 3 months, which was a place not meant for habitation. And we have an emergency shelter that she stayed at for 10 months, and that was an emergency shelter. And then before that, she was in an apartment that she rented. For 5 years. So this is where she was stably housed. So we're going to go from there, and we see that she, like from her last instance to now, that we have one episode again of chronic homelessness. And we're going to add these months together because these are both instances that count as literally homeless. And we are going to add those together to equal 13 months. And then we can look at the date, and this date of the last episode is going to be 13 months ago. So that would be 19. And again, Amy does not remember the exact date, but because today is the 30th, we're going to put that in there. Okay. All right. So now this last one is going to be a little bit more challenging. I wanted to do 2 easy ones and then more of a sticky one. So bear with me. Eric has been sleeping at a transitional housing program for 4 days. Before that, he slept outside for 3 months following a fight with his roommate at his apartment. Eric reports he and his roommate fought the entire 6 months they lived together. He was sick of it, so he moved out. Before that, Eric stayed in an emergency shelter for over a year. He began staying there when he lost his job and could no longer afford the room he rented at a boarding house. He stayed for 3 months. Eric enjoyed living at the boarding house because he had slept in an abandoned building for 18 months previously. He liked having his own space and enjoyed having friends around him. He reports his neighbor would drive him to get his injection for schizophrenia when it was too cold or rainy to take the bus. So I went ahead and did this one as well. And again, starting from where Eric was sleeping last night, he'd been sleeping in a transitional housing for 4 days. He had been sleeping outside for 3 months. He was in an apartment that he rented for 6 months, then in an emergency shelter for a year, then a boarding house where he rented for 3 months, and then an abandoned building for 18 months, right? So transitional housing is again going to fall into that 7 days or more. And if he has not been there for 7 days or more, then that's not going to break this episode. So he's still considered level 1, and this time will count. So for this is going to be 1 episode here for him. And then we have him renting where he rented his own place. So this is a place where he's staying at with his own funds. So this is going to break an episode because he was there for 7 days or more. And then we have an emergency shelter here, where this is going to be an episode. And then he was at another boarding house before that he rented. So this is going to break that episode as well. So this is going to be a separate episode. And then before that, the abandoned building where he was staying at for 18 months, because he had gone to, because this is going to be like at the cap end of those 3 months for him, or that 3 years for him. This would be another episode, right? Because we had another stay of being stably housed in between that. All right. So this is why I like doing it this way, is that it's very a neat way to see in order where things are and where and how the episodes are broken. So you can see here that we have 3 separate instances for him of being in an emergency shelter or a place not meant for habitation. So we have 3 separate episodes, okay? And then we can add up the time. So we have year, 18 months, so 6 months. Pretty sure my math is right. I'm really good at advanced math, not as well with simple math, especially when I'm on the phone. And then if we look at the dates, so then he told us that, that he knew exactly when he had left the place that he was before. And we're going to say that he said it was May 15th of 2018. And he that's when he left where he was before. Okay, so that's where we got the date. Okay, we're just going to say on this one that he gave us the date, and we're not going to have to substitute the 15th then. But then that will give us those three separate instances. Adding up this time would give us well, I think that's closer to 30 months, but that's okay. That's going to give us our time here, and then that's going to give us this location, or this state of homelessness. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Um, does anyone need a break, or how are we doing on how's everybody doing? Because I wanted to transition back into client track to just go over the client space, and then we're going to start talking about assessment types.
I think just to be cognizant of people's time and stuff, I think for all of us to take a break and come back is probably not very feasible when we're doing through an online service. So I think we just keep
Perfect.
forging ahead.
Perfect. That's fine. I am going to keep going. If you guys need to take a break, I totally understand. So I'm going to switch gears a little, and we're going to take a break and go back into client track. And I'm going to talk about navigation a little and the client space. So you see here that we've got the blue carousel. For the longest time, I called it the blue the arrow thingy. However, it does have a name. It is the carousel. And if I click on the arrows, you can see there are multiple work groups or multiple workspaces that we have here. And this is the one that we were on. This is the home workspace or the user dashboard. And now we're going to go into the client space. And I'm just going to go there by clicking on that. We have clients up here before. I can still hide this as I did. I can also submit a help ticket from this, as I can with any page if I need to. I can even manage and change what work group I'm in from here. And then I have the my side dashboard here where I've got client information. So this is going to be Jessica's middle area here, or this top area here is going to have Jessica's PII, or Jessica's identifying information, where we know without a shadow of a doubt that the Jessica Rabbit that is sitting in front of us that we're doing an enrollment for is going to be the Jessica Rabbit that we are providing these services to. Okay, there may be other Jessica Rabbits, but this one's the one we're working with. If Jessica had any interested others, we would be able to see them here. And we can see here that Jessica has some enrollments and some active in services and stuff as well. So we see that she's active. She's staying in our emergency shelter, that she was getting services, and that she at one point was in our PSH program. We can see the services that Jessica had, and we can see that she has had some case notes. If we click up here, we're going to be able to see that Jessica does have a partner, Roger, that's staying with her, and we'll be able to manage that household from here. If we needed to add family members or see the family history, we are able to do that up here as well. Couple of things on the profile. So this is going to be information that is pertinent to Jessica herself. We may have the to edit her client information. This is going to be her demographic information that we can see here and update. If Jessica had gone by any other aliases, we would be able to see those here. The case managers that Desta's worked with, she's worked with 2 Destas. We would also be able to, from here, since I am one of the people here that Desta's worked with, that Jessica's worked with, we would be able to edit this if I needed to. We can also see the case notes that Jessica has in the system, and we're going to go over a little later how to add those. If Jessica had any files uploaded, we would be able to see them here, and we could also add files. We can also see Desta's info release, and this is going to be important because this is going to be what allows us to share data in the system with other agencies. So keep in mind that the client track releases are meant to be used for entering, like this right here is only for client track itself. You're going to have different info release forms that are used outside of the agent that you're going to get signed, that you're going to update for this. And you may have to get separate ones for providing services for release of information. So this one in particular is just talking about data and how it's shared within client track. Okay, so you may have different policy and procedures depending on what you're dealing with that's going to be addressing like sharing services and what you would need to do outside of that. So for this, we're just talking about how it's relating to sharing data within the system. And we can see here that Jessica is sharing to info release 1. That's the one that everyone shares to. It's our master release. And that the current release that she was on was signed at 5/20, was signed on 5/27/2020, and that she is share intake globally. And what share intake globally means is that Jessica is able to share is searchable within the system. So she is sharing basic identifying information, like the information that allows her to know without a shadow of a doubt that is her. It's going to be this top box here. And then she's also sharing information. She's also searchable, which means that individuals outside of our sample org that we're in would be able to search for Jessica and see her basic identifying information, but they're not going to see those enrollments down here. So the reason why we can see them is that they all belong to this organization that we're logged into, okay? And more importantly, because I entered most of this data, this is going to be data that I see, okay? So you're always going to be able to see the data that you put in the system. If Jessica were to update her sharing to share intake to MOU, this doesn't add any new data because we don't have any new data for her to share. But what's going to happen now is that if we log in to another org, that we would be able to see her data for this. And they would be able to see the enrollments. Now, they're not going to be able to see the whole enrollment. They're just going to be able to see this box here of information. And there are some limitations to this. For instance, HOPWA will never be shared. And neither will like if an agency or program is receiving substance abuse funding, that information isn't going to be shared. And it's because because we're able to glean certain information about that person based on just their association with that enrollment. For example, if someone is in a HOPWA program, we know that a criteria to be in that program is to be diagnosed with HIV/AIDS, correct? Or to be in a substance abuse program, you have to have had a substance abuse diagnosis. So there's certain information that just by belonging to that group, we're going to be able to know certain information about that, and those are going to be hidden. So we're never going to see those unless we are logged into that org that created those records. But for general HMIS, we are going to be able to see these as long as that sharing is turned on there. Now, the one that is the bane of my existence that kind of causes the most issues is this restrict to organization. And that is because restrict to organization does not mean that it's going to restrict to the org that you have logged into. It's going to restrict to the org that created this client record. So if I select that, and Jessica, and this was not a client record that that my agency created, then there's a good chance that this would go away and I wouldn't be able to search it because it's going to pull back to the client record that created it. And that may not be mine. So it's very important to pay attention to stuff like that because most of the time what clients are wanting to do is to share and take globally, okay? MOU, release share and take to MOU for the full share, or the share and take globally is the two main ones that are shared to. Most people don't put an end date just because HMIS our releases don't have an end date. They just get updated if a client wants to update their release. And especially if you have a signature pad or a touch screen, you are able to keep track a signature here and save that as well. Do we have any questions about info release?
We do not.
Perfect. You also have some common assessments on here. Now, some of these are going to be the ones in the intake that we're going to go over, like the domestic violence, the barriers. Education is one that you may be collecting outside of the workflow, and that's okay to do as well. You also have the financial evals, and sometimes these are collected outside of this as well. We have some assessments that she's in. These are the ones that are going to be tied to that HMIS enrollment. This is the one that's going to be a different one and is going to have a different set of rules with that and do the median income, which you may need. I'm not certain, but it's going to depend on what your program needs. And then you also have the HMIS data as well. So we can see here the entry types and the different kinds that are here. And we can view these as well from here. And then we have other assessments. So this may include the COVID screening, health assessment, and these may not be required, but like for your program, these may not be required for your HMIS grant, but like you may have other program requirements that are needing them. And you'd be able to view and add these here. The triage assessment is coordinated entry assessment, but you all aren't using that. You're going to go into your coordinated entry to do that. You also have enrollments and services, and this is going to show you just a master list of the open enrollment or open and closed enrollments that an individual has. You're going to be able to see quick services, referrals, and we're going to go over services a little later. And then you've got the RI and the SPDAT assessment. So if an individual has a SPDAT assessment, for coordinated entry, you would be able to view those as well, the same as with RI. I'm not going to cover RI and the SPDATs in this just because it's going to be a lot and we're already here for 4 hours anyways. but these are here if you need them. This is just going to be a basic overview. Now, one of the things that I wanted to show you guys before we get started is how because we're about to enter a place where we're going to start talking about the different kinds of assessments that you can do within ClientTrack. And I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. And we're about to get into the part that a lot of people find the most helpful here, even though I think it's all helpful. And this is like the meat of what most people do with their day, you know, like that meat and potatoes piece, or tofu and potatoes if you're, you know, so inclined. Is there a question for me, Denise?
Nope.
Okay, sorry. I just saw it come up and I thought there was a question. So for HMIS, typically but like again, with this assessment, we're going to be talking about the ESG or full COC intake. This is the most common assessment done, and this is the one that kind of has the foundation that the others use. You know, we are developing training videos for HOPWA and PATH and the others. But when you're in ClientTrack, and if you're dealing with HMIS, all of the assessments tend to fall under one of four categories. And that's going to be an entry or intake assessment. And this is typically done once per enrollment period. So you're going to have one entry or intake assessment per client stay and that for your program. And this is going to be dated for the time that a client, to be, that is going to be dated for the day that they began enrolling into your program and working in your program and getting services. So this would be the day, this is going to be the day that they sat down and you physically did their intake, be it on paper form or be it directly into ClientTrack. Again, we use data in the past tense because we enter and document after a service has been provided or after an incident has been done. So the important thing that we're dating then is the date that that service actually happened, not the date that the service was done. Okay. It's very important with HMIS and with data entry that, you know, we're documenting the correct dates. We can also do something called a during program enrollment. And this is done to track progress or changes to the client record that are naturally and organically going to happen. So for instance, we may be working with Jessica Rabbit, and Jessica from day one is not employed, but when she started working with us, her case manager started working with her to find employment and setting a budget, and she got a job. Okay. So that is a natural change to her record. It doesn't mean that her entry intake was wrong now, you know, because she did indeed came to us unemployed, but now that she does, and we want to give ourselves credit for that because that does pull into your SPMs, which is kind of like our community report card, and it's going to pull in to APRs and the LSA and all these big stuff. So like it looks like little dots, you know, just very insignificant data pieces, but these are big things that really help us show what we're doing as a community and helps track your progress. And you can have as many during program enrollment updates as is needed. So, you know, if Jessica comes to you every day with an update to her record, you know, like she's got a new job or she's got new health insurance or something like that, you can do as many during programs enrollments as you need to. The other kind that you're going to hear a lot about is the annual which is only done once per year, and it is going to be based off of when an individual has been in a program for a year or more. So if a client has not been in it leaves your program and exits at 10 months or 11 months, you're not going to have to do an annual assessment. But if they've been in that program for over a year, you're going to have to do that annual assessment. And there can only be one per year. So if there's more than one, this will cause data quality issues, because what tends to happen is it'll pull from both of those, and that can cause some funkiness. The other thing to note with this is very important, is while it does go off of the anniversary of the entry date, if you have households that are enrolled, it's going to go off of the head of households enroll date. So if you have a mom or a dad that enrolled on January 1st, and for whatever reason the children didn't enroll until February 1st, everybody is going to get an update and an annual on the head of households anniversary date of January 1st. Okay. This is going to be the same if a child was born, and maybe the child was born on October 15th later that year, and it came home on October 20th. So they would have an entry date of 10/20, but even the head of household that has a anniversary date of January 1st, everybody's going to get an update on that January 1st date. Okay. And that's just, and you can get into some gray areas there, but this is how HUD wants to work to just kind of help keep it uniform and streamlined, to keep it that way. The other thing, just to mention, just to remember with this, is HUD gives you up to 60 days before that anniversary day to get the enrollment done. So it does not have to be done directly on January 1st, but it can be done within that 60-day window before, and it would still count during that time.
And so this is Denise. I'll jump in here quick too. For our ESG funded agencies, the during program enrollment is what you enter when you do recertification. So your homeless prevention clients that need to be recertified every 3 months, that would be when you complete their recertification and go into the system. That's how you would enter that assessment, would be as a during program enrollment. Our rapid rehousing clients don't have to be officially recertified except for annually. But again, when you're working with those households and maybe increasing the amount of household expenses that the client is responsible for and those types of things. So, every so often you're going, or every month with case management, or every couple months you're going through their budget. If there's at a point where they're going to be responsible for, let's say, 25% of their rent, or they're responsible for all their utilities or something like that, that during program enrollment can be used for those rapid rehousing clients also to enter that data so that it's in the system. Just in case, if you don't keep all that information in the file, or somebody else has to access the information in the system, that's how you can enter those. But the recertifications for sure for the homeless prevention clients, those get entered as a during program enrollment.
And the final kind that we have is an exit assessment, and it's just that. It is going to be the day that the client stops receiving services, the day that they move out, or the last day that they spent the night in the bed. Okay. And that's important because with HUD, you don't hold beds, because what tends to happen is if you're at an emergency shelter and that person is expected to show back up that night to check into the bed, and they find out that their friends are staying at emergency shelter B, they'll go and stay at emergency shelter B if there's openings and not tell you. But if you've held that bed for 3 days, and exit them 3 days later, then there's a chance that agency B is trying to enroll that person, and the system will not allow the same person to occupy 2 beds. So you may, if you're holding that bed for for that person, and that other agency is trying to enroll them because they're legitimately staying there, it's going to block them from doing it. All right. A couple of things that I wanted to go over here, which we've kind of gone over, is just with intake assessments. This is the initial assessment done when a client starts. Only one gets completed. Data reflects real life, so make sure that those dates matter. And then the things to consider is with the dates, you want to consider enroll dates and make sure that the dates and the assessments, the entry date and the date on the assessments that are tied to it in the workflow match up. We're going to look at this in just a minute. So, just be mindful of that, and I'll show you. You also want to be mindful of move-in dates if you have a rapid rehousing or a PSH program. And the difference between an enroll date and a move-in date is an enroll date is going to be the day that the person starts services, and the unit may not be ready yet, or, they may not sign the lease yet. So there may be a gap between with rapid rehousing and PSH programs, for example, that we begin working with them and the day that they physically move into the unit. So the enroll date is going to be the date that reflects when we started services, whereas the move-in date is going to reflect the date that either they got the keys, the lease was signed, or they physically moved into the unit. We also want to keep in mind of client data and case members. So there is a difference between family members and case members. We're going to look at that as well, because not always do individuals enroll into a program that may be a part of the household. Maybe someone is staying someplace else, or maybe someone isn't able to move in there, so they may not always be visible there. And then you also want to keep in mind of your data collection environment, just because we are collecting a lot of sensitive information when we're working with people. So you want to make sure that, you're providing a private area to collect data. All right. The other thing that I wanted to talk about as well is, before we go in and start working on this, is duplicate clients and duplicate clients. When we go back into the system, I'm going to show us how to search. And a duplicate client record is a client record where a client has 2 or more records that belong to the same person. So it could be someone with the same social security number or the same name, have the same social security number and the same date of birth, but they have, like there's a Johnny and a Jonathan, or a Sam and a Samantha, or that person goes by, like their nickname is Sissy, so everyone calls them Sissy, and they're in there as Sissy in one record, and their birth name as Gladys in another. So those would be examples of duplicate client records. And what that is one person in real life has 2 records. And this can cause problems just because typically it doesn't allow the user to see all the data. So you may have a record where somebody may be stably housed in a permanent supportive housing record bed on one record that's a duplicated record, but it looks like that they have been saying that they just left an emergency shelter on another. So those could be 2 very different scenarios, and how you provide services, somebody that just left an emergency shelter versus somebody that just started a permanently supportive housing program. And I've heard of some, instances like that before where that's happened. And somebody actually was permanently housed and then tried to go all the way back through their coordinated entry process again because they wanted a different unit. And because it was on 2 different records, it was a minute before it got caught. But thankfully it was. Now, this can be a pain, to deal with as an end user, but can also cause data to be skewed just because it looks like we're serving more people than what we are, or the client record isn't intact, and reports like the SPM and the LSA do keep up and, pay attention. Like that kind of information is important. If they go from an emergency shelter to a PSH, you know, that's looked at differently. And this can cause increased data quality errors because typically one record is less intact than the other, and there's data quality issues on it. So I do have a best search practice just to ensure that you are fully searching the client record and to ensure that you have the all the information that's needed. So what I first, because you know, and again, it's not so much that end users and that you all have, you know, are not fully searching, but I found that especially with homeless data, there's a lot of mistrust around that and a lot of secrecy. So clients, some of the things that I've seen where clients will give the correct social security number, but they'll flip the last two of the digits, or they'll give the correct date, birth and year, a month and year, but they won't give the correct date, and things like that that can help with that, or that can cause issues like that. So, you know, we're going to go through how to search when we start this next, when we go back into the system. But, you know, just keep in mind to search first by social, then by date of birth, and then by partial first and partial last name. And whenever possible, try to use legal names. The exception to that is with trans individuals. We may be in a position where we are helping them transition, so it is okay to use their preferred name, as this can cause some psychological issues if not. So just keep that in mind. But we're going to go into the system now and do some more demos. All right. So this part is where, you know, we're going to kind of get in the meat of what you do, and we're going to go through a couple of different assessment types. To where we will have, we're going to go first how to search, then we're going to do an entry during program enrollment, an annual, and an exit. So first of all, let's search for a client, and we're going to pretend that Eric came to us for services. And first, I've got a person here that I'm going to search, and I'm going to do. All right, so there's 2 people coming up with 2496. So I'm going to clear that out and do the birth date. All right, and then only one's going to come up there, and this is the person that we're looking at, and we can see that the social and the date of birth match, but I'm still, like, you know, just to show you the end of it, this is what I would have done to ensure that this is the right person. And I'm going to click it. And this is Eric. So we see Eric is in our services only program. All right. And we can see some basic information about Eric. And then the next thing that we're going to do is enroll Eric into our program. So we are going to do an intake. And this is just going to be the regular intake. And this is going to be for pretty much everything that you're going to do. You're going to use this intake to enroll somebody in a program. This is the basic baseline HMIS intake, and this is the one that, depending on how your program, what program you select on the enrollments page, is going to dictate the data compliance pieces that you need. So as long as you're finishing the workflow and you're answering all the questions, you should have all of the good data that you need to ensure good data quality. And you're not going to have any compliance pieces are missing as long as you're following this. Because that's what Denise and I do. We keep up with all that so you don't have to. Oh. Sorry guys, I accidentally hit a button. Take us back to where we are. So every time you hit this button, clearly you can see that, as I showed you. You've got this window that comes up and this little gray area, and you're going to have some options here. This means that you're in a workflow. And a workflow is a series of steps to enroll somebody into a program. And the cool thing about that is like I said, is as long as you are following this workflow and going through this, this will give you all of the HUD required pieces that you need for each assessment type. You have the ability to pause this workflow, and remember, like if we pause this, this is going to show up under our pause workflows under our user dashboard on our user page, and then we have the ability to cancel the workflow. Canceling the workflow means that you didn't want that to happen, and it's not going to save any progress that wasn't already saved. Okay, so sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. You know, we're doing a full brand new intake, so we probably wouldn't want to exit out of this unless we were understanding that we wanted to redo this. You know, that like we're gonna have this stopped. Typically when I exit out of a workflow, this is because I'm doing data quality pieces and that workflow is already complete in its entirety, but I'm making corrections on it. So I don't recommend using this very much. I recommend pausing it and then going in and managing it through your paused workflow. Okay. You are going to have these options come up each time. An add new client is going to be if you've already searched for the client and you know that they're not already in the system. Now, if you click on this, it's still going to have you search for the client just to ensure that there's no duplicate client records out there with that same name. And it's going to look the same as doing a regular intake. The only difference is that the forms are going to be blank instead of pre-populated with the already known data. So it's what the client track tries to do is save you some steps by already populating that data in if it's a known client record. You also have select another client, and that is just that. This is going to take you to the search page like this, but in the workflow where you're going to be able to search for another client using that partial social, partial doing the last four of the social, the date of birth, and then partial first and partial last name to see if they are there. And then if the client up here is the client that you want to enroll in the program, then you're going to use the current client. And as I said, it's going to pre-populate all this data. And this is going to be the basic identifying information page. You can see here it's going to be tracking our progress. And there's a couple of things here I wanted to point out. If Eric said that he wanted to, you know, go by a different name, we could change that here. If we wanted to add his middle name, he wants to include his middle name, we can do that here. If he says that he is only going to give his partial name, or if he does not want to include his name, we can update that here. So for example, if Eric is not his real name, or if he wanted to go by his street name Merriweather, we would want to select that option. And then we can also have his social. Now, please keep in mind, like with social, this is only used for deduplication purposes. It's not used, it's not, you know, something that is in places where people can see this readily. I've had a lot of questions, you know, like when I was a provider, because I think a lot of people think that this is kind of like entering stuff on Facebook, and it's not. This is the same protections that like your doctor's office has in the firewall. And one of the things that I wanted to point out in this workflow is, do you all see these red asterisks here? These are the HUD mandated data elements. So these are the ones that when you do APRs or when you do reports throughout the year, that are the ones that are going to be reported on. And if you try to save these without that, so if I have full name reported, but I take out his name, it's going to give me an error message. And that's because I didn't have a data field in one of these required ones. So you're either going to have to put the data quality as no name reported or client refused or client doesn't know, or that partial street name reported, to move on. Now, this, again, we are going to be reporting his full name. And even though this may, like, he may have chosen to refuse this, that is his right, this will still trigger a data quality error on the client on your data quality reports. And even though it is a client's right to refuse, HUD still flags these as errors just as a way to keep track of them. Typically, if you have an agency that has a lot of these going on, people want to look at that to see what's going on within that. So just keep in mind that even though it's a client rights to refuse, and that may be, and the client doesn't know, may be the accurate response, this would be an instance where, where this may be something that is going to trigger a data quality error. So these will trigger data quality errors. Again, with the social security number, if you report it like this, or like this, sorry, y'all, I'm trying to update it to X's, but it looks like my keyboard's slow. But if you put something that is not these numbers, it'll also trigger an error. Also, too, the cool thing about this is this, the Social Security has the same logic in it that is used to create the Social Security numbers for individuals. So it would know based off of this if this is a real Social Security number or a fake one. And that's, again, going to come into play with the data quality report, right? So Eric did report to us his full date of birth. It's going to auto-calculate age. He did give us the full and correct date of birth, but if he'd only given us a partial or an approximate date of birth, this is going to trigger a data quality error, but we're not going to have that there. These are filled out the way that we need them to be. And if you needed to read up on where to more information about what operationally defines each of these or any of these, it's going to be in the HUD data dictionary. This is not something you're going to really do a lot with. This is just saying that Eric, this is the household that Eric's belonging to, and that he is the head of household. Right. So this is a family member screen. Typically, you may not do a lot with this because it's just going to show you of the family members who all's enrolled. So you can ask Eric, hey, I see you're in a household by yourself. Is that accurate? And he may say yes, but in this instance, he says no. His daughter is living with him now. And we are able to add individuals here. It's going to do a search again, and there's no records found that match Debbie Markey. And then you're just going to go across and fill this out just like there was a regular client record. And for children and these, it's going to match what the parent has, but you are able to add more or to uncheck them if needed. We're just going to leave them the same for right now. And then you want to go all the way to the end. And this is going to create a record for Debbie as well, which is cool. So we don't have to start a separate workflow to add Debbie. All right, this is going to be the HUD program enrollment screen, and this is going to be the page that will allow us to enroll Debbie and Eric into our program. And this page is also going to dictate the program, the forms and stuff that come up after this. So if we were enrolling in a PATH program or a HOPWA program, versus an ESG program. This is going to show different logic. And again, that's going to go into that compliance piece for you. And you are able to select any date that you want for the client to enroll. Like there's not going to be an issue if you do one for 5 years ago. I, for the sake of this training, am going to select a date from 2 years ago just because we're going to go through like a full enrollment with this. So, you know, like we're going to do it during program enrollment and annual. So I want to give us enough time to do this. And we are able to come in here and add a housing move-in date if needed. We're going to do that later, but I just wanted to show you guys right now, like this is also going to be the screen where you add that. So right now what we're saying is that they have started our program, but they haven't moved into a unit yet. Right. So this is the HMIS universal data elements. And again, we have the required dates. And you can see that this is going to pre-populate this date to be the date of the program enrollment. We want to make sure that this date matches our enroll date because this is what tells the system that all this data belongs together. Okay. And if those dates don't match, then it may not pull in on data quality assessments and reports the way we want it to, because it's not tied to that 6/1/18 enrollment date. And I highly recommend the default to last because it's going to pull in the information from their last assessment, and it's going to save you some keystrokes, and you just have to ensure that the data are accurate. Now, this living situation, this is going to be those chronic homeless questions that we talked about. And because we did that for Eric, we can see here we have his information as well of where he was and what he needed. Okay, so we have 3 episodes in 24 months. So where did he stay last night? We're going to say he was at a place not meant for habitation. And he was there for days or more. And we have the date and 12 months or more. And that's the cool thing about this and why I like doing it that way is that when you have this, when you've already done those steps and worked backwards, you've already got the data that you need to put into this. Okay. Right. And Eric is saying that he has no insurance. Right. Right. Now we have the barriers. So we confirm with Eric that he does have a chronic health condition. And we can ask him, you can put in an explanation, but you don't have to. And you can add others if that reflects their record. Right. Now with the domestic violence question, we can also do the default to last, and his last is no. That's still the same. Client track is also intuitive. So if you said yes, it's going to ask you when that experience occurred. And if this current homeless episode is a result of them fleeing an abusive situation, and we can update that accordingly. Now on this one, he does not have any income or non-cash benefits. It's going to be like food stamps or food stamps, snaps, or welfare benefits, stuff like that are going to come in for that. You also are able to track expenses if you want. This isn't required, but say for instance, there was a mortgage or rent that you wanted to track as a part of that, or if there was some automobile, like if they had a car payment or something that you wanted to do, you could track that there. Okay. We're just going to say no for this. I just wanted to show you guys what that looked like so we can move on. All right. Now, we have Debbie's intake. So because we just enrolled the head of household and we added her to this as a case member, we're going to enroll Debbie next. And where Debbie's a child, this is going to be a smaller intake, but it's still going to give us the pertinent information that we needed for Debbie to enroll. All right, Debbie does not have any of these, but this is the other cool thing. So like if I were to put yes here and where we marked no as a disabling condition, it's going to give us an angry message because of this. So this is saying that you can't, like, if somebody has a disabling condition, it's naturally going to fall in one of these categories, but we marked no as disabling condition. So this is just like an extra added data quality step to keep the data clean. And I'm just going to mark no here because, again, I just wanted to show you guys that it'll do that. But what we could do is go to her new assessment for her, to go to her demographics page and change that to a yes and have that updated. Save and close. Because again, it's just no, I just wanted to show you guys that. And then you're done when the workflow says that you're done. And we can finish and go back to this. And we can see now that there's a permanent supportive housing type on this. Okay. Now, the next kind that we're going to do is a during program enrollment. And again, a during program enrollment, you can do as many of these or maybe even none of these as you want. And this is going to be different from editing. So if you click on the blue action wheel next to this, you've also got edit project entry workflow. This is going to be used if the information that you have that you reported on an entry assessment was wrong or inaccurate. So for example, if Eric came back to you and was like, hey, yeah, I forgot to tell you, I do have insurance, okay? We would come here and select no changes. Until we got to the form that had this, that had the change that we needed to make. And he was like, yes, I have Medicaid, right? I forgot to tell you that, right? And then we can hit save. And what this does is it saves over top of that entry assessment and updates it. So we're not saving that wrong change of no, we're saving the correct one as yes. And this is going to be an instance where we would want to cancel out of the workflow because we made the change that we needed to, and we know that the rest of that assessment is intact, so there's no need for us to go through it. But again, you're only going to use edit entry workflow if the entry assessment has information that is wrong or inaccurate on it, because we want to save over top of it. For collecting natural or organic program updates and changes, you will want to do a during program enrollment, or if it's time for an annual assessment, to go ahead and do the annual assessment that way if it falls into that 60-day window. Okay. So,
and I think it's a good time here, Dustin, to mention too. So if somebody has been enrolled in your program and, you know, a couple weeks or a few weeks later they get a job where when they entered the program they didn't have income, you would not go in and edit that entry assessment to add the income because they didn't have the income when they enrolled in your program. That's when you would want to do either like an update annual assessment to add that, or I mean an update during program assessment, or you would go in and just enter a new financial assessment into their file. But you don't want to, I mean, because that's more of an update, but it wasn't true when they entered the program. Is that the correct way to kind of explain that, I guess? Yes. I just don't want, because we want to know what their income, what their living situation, what all that stuff was at the time they entered your program. As things change, you can do, you know, new assessments or add assessments, but you don't want to change the enrollment unless it's something like Desta said, where oh, hey, I forgot I do have insurance, or I found my social security card and one of my numbers I gave you was wrong, or something like that, where it's a legit change to the information they gave you at entry. So just to kind of keep that in mind too, as you work through this and start editing clients and changing things, just to know when it's appropriate to edit something versus when it's appropriate just to add a new assessment for somebody.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very succinct way to put it. Thank you, Denise. All right. So the next that I'm going to show you is how to do a during program enrollment. And it's going to look the same as doing an annual assessment, and the steps are going to be the same, but we're going to select different options that are going to be important on that. So you're going to do all of your enrollment, all of these new assessment updates off of the blue action wheel. So you can see here we have update / annual assessment, and then we have exit the assessment, exit the enrollment here. So once you start that enrollment, you're going to be able to manage all of this from that blue action wheel. Let's start with the update annual assessment. So I'm going to click on that option, and you can see here that this enrollment comes up, and we're not going to be able to add or update anyone here, you can see, because they're both already enrolled and we're working on a previously done enrollment. And we can see their start date.
I was trying to hear what they're saying, but can we take that out? I thought we took that out.
Donna,
It's a WebEx
mute your
thing.
line, please.
I can't hear what they're saying. I won't say that I can't. I'll just sit here and.
Donna, can you hear us? I'll try and reach out to her, Desta.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we have the option here where you don't have to take anything out or change this. This is just showing you the people that are part of that enrollment. And you can see the start date. Now we do have here the housing move-in date. We're going to take this opportunity to add their housing move-in date and say that they moved in on September 1st of 2018. Again, we're kind of going to be going back and forth in time here because I want to show you guys how to do all of this and how it looks on one enrollment. So just pretend like it's 2 years ago, guys, before the craziness of 2020 happened. And then as we go forward in time, we'll change things. So we're going to update that here and move forward and click save. We don't want to hit no changes here because if we do that, it's not going to save our date. So let's hit save. And we will have an option here of doing a during program enrollment or an annual. Again, we're going to be doing a during program enrollment because it's not time for their annual because it's just 3 months after their enroll date, but we're just adding some updates to that record that are different from the entry date. So let's select during program enrollment. And we don't have to update everything on here. So this is where that default to last assessment comes in handy. We're going to change this. Yes, say yes, they had insurance now. And we're going to say that he has also gotten some insurance, gone to some counseling, and there is a mental health diagnosis. So we don't have to put what kind it is, but we are going to update that as yes. And like I said, you may not, there's not going to be an update here, so we're not going to do that. And then move forward. And we're going to say, yes, that there is a job. It's going to be earned income. And you don't have to add the details, but I just like showing it on the ticket. And with HUD as well, not only do they want the type, but also the numeric monthly amount. So if they tell you that their income is $200 a week, you would want to multiply that by 4. to get the monthly amount, but just keep in mind that that's the monthly amount, not the biweekly or weekly amount to put in there. And they've also got, you know, the different kinds. All right, and then we're going to move forward. And it's going to ask us if we want to do one for Debbie as well. And if Debbie has some information, we can. We're going to say that yes, Debbie does, because she does have insurance now. No changes to her barriers. All right. Excellent. So that's got this done. It's going to show you, if we go here, the enrollments. You can see now that there is a PSH enrollment. And if we come down here to master assessments, and then wait for client track to load, you can see here that we have the DESTA's PSH with the entry, and then a during program enrollment as well. Okay. Now, the next that we're going to do is we're going to do a annual, and we're going to do that in the same way. And again, you can only have one annual per enrollment when you do this. So we can see here that their enroll date is 6/1/2018. And we're going to add a new assessment because we're not going to be updating. The only one that we would have to update is that during program enrollment assessment, and we want to add a new one. And then we would want to change the date here to the date that we did the assessment. So we're going to pretend this time that we did it on exactly that anniversary. But again, you have 60 days before to get that done. All right. And it's going to be the same as doing an annual or doing a during program enrollment. You can go through here and update the information that has changed, and you're not going to change the information that hasn't changed. So we're going to say that yes, he has Medicaid and Medicare now. And you can see that that date's changing along with that because we changed it on that. And then default to last. He still has this job, but now he also has non-cash benefits. And this is going to come up, and we're going to say yes. $100. And then that's going to be the change because he's still working the same job as a security guard, and that's still the correct amount. So we're going to move forward. And it's going to ask us the same thing for Debbie, and this is going to be a new assessment because remember, family members are all going to go, are only going to go on the head of household state. And we're going to change the state first and do the same thing. She also has Medicaid now. And we're done, right? And if we come back over here to master assessments, we can see the annual and the during program enrollment that is there, okay? Are there any questions about what we've gone over so far?
There are not any questions in the chat box. One thing that I will add too is it's important when we're doing those during program assessments, when we're noting recertifications for the ESG program, or when we're doing annual assessments, that we are making sure, even though we might default the last assessment, that we are truly updating any information that has changed since that last assessment was done. One of the things that definitely gets reported on in our federal reporting is when people leave a program. So when you go through the exit assessment here pretty soon, Desta, it's really important because they track, did they have a change in income while they were in your program? Did they access other services while they were in your program? So did they have insurance when they left your program versus when they started your program? You know, so HUD really does look at a lot of those different types of reporting components to make sure that while households are enrolled in our programs, that we are working with them to make sure they're getting other benefits they qualify for, that they have an increase in income. So when they leave our program, that they're sustaining that housing on their own after the program goes away. So it is important. There's a reason that all of those questions are asked in the workflow and why we're tracking that information, because HUD really does look at that when we send in our reporting.
Yep.
Oh, it does look like we got a question. When we first trained, we were told to put 0 for the Medicaid, SNAP, etc. Otherwise, it adds to their income. So do we now put the amount of what they receive for SNAP benefits, etc.? So, and I guess I can probably answer this. So the one thing is that, I mean, you can put those amounts in there. The thing is, when you're calculating their income, so when you're doing the income calculation as to whether they qualify for the program or not, there's certain guidelines in what's included in income and what's not. So even though you might put that dollar amount in client track in that workflow, when you're figuring out their income calculations, the SNAPs, I think it's the SNAPs, is the one that's not included as part of their income. But that doesn't mean you can't put the amount in here. Note that when you're putting that in here.
Yes. Right. Okay, are we good with questions, or do we need to, or are we ready to move on, Denise?
Yep, there's no more questions in here.
Perfect. All right, so I wanted to show before we exit just how to do a case note and a service. Just because, this is something that naturally you'll be doing in that time, even though I clicked the wrong thing. So you have services that you can add, and services are going to be tasks or duties that you perform for a client while they're enrolled in a program that you need to track. Typically, the services are being tracked are ones that either are getting reported on for different reasons, or they're a part of a spend down with the grant, so other people are interested in them. So they can be very specific per program and per agency on what is being collected, but this is kind of like a catch-all for everybody. So because services are just pretty easy to navigate in general. On a client page, if we click on services, this is going to show us the services that we have access to. For Eric, he has one that we had just done earlier for my sample work, and we can add another one. So to do that, we are going to click Add New and select the enrollment that it's going to be tied to. As you can see here, he has 2 open enrollments, and that's okay because one's a services only and one is a program. You can select the grant that is going to be paying down on that if you need to, but you don't have to. You can see here that you can just have this tied to the program and not the grant. And then we want to select the service that we're doing. There are a bunch of different services available in the system. So what people try to do is just pick the one that best suits the need. For this one, it's going to be case or care management. And we provided this service a few months ago. We just forgot to do it. And we have a couple of options here with care case management that I've seen to do that. So again, this may be individual to your agency on how it's collected, but account typically, is done by, like a box or a unit or something, whereas case management is usually done by hours. Now, I have seen instances where like people have counted one count for case management as 1 hour or something like that, but it's set up ahead of time for people to do. I prefer, if you're going to do care management or case management like that, to just do minutes. So with this, we're going to say that we did 1 unit or 1 hour of case management. And then sometimes people will put a numeric value set up into this. You don't have to have it, but you can put that in there if needed. I'm not going to because we just count the hours. We don't have to spend down anything. And then we can also add comments here. And thankfully, Client Track has spell check because I am one of the world's worst spellers. All right. And then when we make sure that all of this is filled out, you know, we've checked the date, we've got the units and stuff correct, just like when we were doing a quick setup, we can save it and see that it's saved here. Now I'm able to go back in and exit and edit this if I want to. You know, if I get the date wrong, I can change that here. I can also delete it. And you can see now that this item's gone. It won't get reported on anything. But sometimes, you know, you delete things by accident. That's okay, because transactional data like this in Client Track is a soft delete, so we can recover it. So what I'm going to do is click on this recycle bin up here and select restore. And go back to services, and we can see here that it's back. Okay, so it's really cool that you can do that, because I don't know about you all, but I accidentally delete things like that quite a bit, and it's nice to have that restored. All right. The next thing that we're going to look at is case notes. And case notes are a little different. They're qualitative data that we need to collect about a client. So, you know, a narrative, because, you know, like we did, we just confirmed a case management note or service that we did, but, you know, we may need to track some information about that service, right? So we're going to say that we provided a case management. You don't have much regarding notes, because not many compliance, there's not any HMIS programs or stuff that requires case notes. This is more of just a convenience thing of, this helps you provide services better and sets you up for success if you're able to do things like this. So the one thing that I do recommend is, you can see here that regarding is required. I recommend of doing something more than just case management note with this, because when those are saved and you have, or on that previous search form, you can sort and search by that, which is cool, because if you know that you need to look for a specific ticket, you can go back through and look at this, and you're not going to have to tear apart a bunch of go into a bunch of different tickets to find it. So I'm going to say and then you can also select the template type. And this is just going to change, you know, like the different templates that you're able to use here if you want to, and kind of give it a different kind down here. You know, so like it can go from a case note, which is general, a clinical case note is going to have this stuff in here. I don't really use that. And then this up here for the note type is just like a descriptor of this regarding, you know, so this would be skill building, for example, you know, because he's getting a certification. And then from here, well, you may have individual stuff at your agencies that you want to set up for this in order to do the, you know, to collect the right information. Typically what you're just going to do is summarize what you guys talked about. So I am not going to go into a big detail, because I don't think you guys need to see me type for so long. I think we'd rather spend our time on other things.
And they also have the ability at this point, Des, to choose. So if you use, like your agency uses some type of case management program in your system, so you can copy and paste notes.
Yes.
Out of that system, and then just paste them into the body of this and add your, you know, the date and regarding and stuff at the top. But you can, you know, and I know specifically to like some of our victim service providers that keep a lot of detailed notes that really have, you know, nothing to do with their ESG program, sometimes they can just copy and paste the notes that are relevant to their ESG case into this program. So you have the capability to do that also.
Yes. Yeah, so you can copy, this is a very general text thing, so you can copy and paste others into this, and it'll accept that. You can also, down here, you can see too, you can add a service as well. I did one separately because I just wanted to show you guys how to do that. But if you are doing a service and a case note at the same time, you can do it all in one swing, which is cool. All right, and I am going to check the hours. Save. And you can see here, you've got the case note time here with the regarding. You are able to print from here as well. And then if we come down here to services, you can see that that was added as well. Okay. So it's pretty cool. All right. The next thing that I wanted to show you all is how to exit an enrollment. So again, we're going to come back to the action wheel. Again, once we do a client record, a lot of the things that we're going to be doing is from the action wheel. We are going to exit a client when they are no longer receiving services from us. And we're going to exit in the day that they do the they leave our program. So select the blue action wheel and select exit the enrollment off of it. And you can see here we're going to be in another workflow. And this is going to pre-populate with the exit date, but we can change that if needed. So we can say that he left, a month ago. And then we're going to choose where he exited to, so exit destination. And if we select no exit interview completed, client doesn't know, refuse data collected, these are going to be things that are going to trigger a data quality issue. Again, that may be accurate, but the way that HUD logic is for data quality, these are still going to be things that are going to flag an issue. Okay. So we're going to say that that Eric has is getting his own apartment and a rental with no other ongoing subsidy, and the exit reason you can choose the best one to fit. We're going to say that he completed program, and this is going to end his case management with me on the user dashboard that we were talking about. And I'm going to leave that checked because with the program that we're dealing with, there's no follow-up for us. So I don't need to keep him on my caseload. All right. We can also choose a service to this if needed. Most of the time, I don't think Denise, you all don't have any particular service that you have to select with this, correct?
Right. No, we don't.
We're going to move
so
forward.
That could be if they forgot to add, or if you want to just do your final case management, maybe at this point when you're closing out their file, you can add that instead of going out and back into services to do that.
Yes. It's just there for you to use, but you may not need to. And again, we have the default to last assessment again, and we just want to make sure that the information that we have in there is still accurate. Okay. None of that's changed, so we're going to leave that the same. Change that to yes. And then you may or may not, it's always going to ask you yes or no, because there are instances where people will leave the enrollment and then others are staying. But in this case, Debbie is going to exit as well. And we're going to use the same information of where she is going. So rental by client with subsidy, and she completed the program. We don't need anything for that again. And we just want to default to last and collect that information. right, and it's going to take us through an abbreviated one for her, but it's going to be the same thing of where you're going to select the information that's needed and update. You can use default to last, but then just make sure that you're collecting the data accurately based off of what you are collecting at that moment, and then hit finish. And we can see now that there is an exit date and an exit reason there as well. Okay. All right. Do we have any questions about that?
There is nothing currently in the chat box. And two, I was going to say, if somebody wants to ask a question instead of type a question, you absolutely can do that too.
Yeah.
I mean, if you even want to put in the chat box, you know, please unmute me or something, we can unmute your phone so that you can ask a question. Or if you called in, you can unmute yourself and ask a question too if you want to. So.
Yeah, I don't bite. Please do. Because we're about ready to go into the reports, and I was going to show you guys the data quality stuff. So like we're kind of going to be leaving the client page right now. Right. So one of the last thing that we wanted to go over was not to fully go over all the reports, just because it takes a lot of time and energy, and that's probably going to be a second training in and of itself. But we did want to take this opportunity to go over the data quality report. And in order to do that, we're going to navigate to the reports page, or the reports workspace, and we're going to do that again by the blue action wheel. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to go over to the arrows and find the reports page. Okay. And the reports tab is going to have a bunch of different options of different reports that you can do. These are going to be what we call ad hoc reports. So all that means is that these are collecting data and getting reports based on previously done data. This isn't like, by running a report, this isn't going to change the data that's already been entered. It's just going to pull from it. Okay. We have a couple of different options here when you're seeing this that we're going to look at. We have this middle area here, which is going to give us some of information of our program, of our current enrollments and case assignments. That was already there. We have Data Explorer for those brave souls that wants to do some custom reporting stuff like Denise. We have Files on Server, and this is going to be where the exports live that you download, okay? And then we also have the asynchronous tasks, and we'll go over that in just a minute. You have the by name list, and these reports that have HMIS in front of them. These are going to be reports that are nestled in HUD logic. So these are going to be the ones that are based off of the HUD data quality manual and off of that HUD reporting, and is going to use the same logic as those. Whereas these others are still interesting and will give us pertinent information about our reports, but they aren't based in that HUD logic. They're just based in data management principles. And it's still good, like you can still use those, but sometimes, like if you're looking for active counts, and especially like for things like chronic homelessness, these reports aren't going to help you as much as these, okay? So again, just know the difference, just keep that difference in your mind, especially, clients and programs. This is a really great report to just kind of give you a snapshot of the reports that are in that program, but it's not based in HUD logic. So again, just keep that in mind. The one that we're going to be looking at mostly is going to be in the report section, and then you've got this export section. The difference between an export and a report is an export is one that it's going to take the system time to download and compile. And when it's done, it's going to be done here on the Files on Server. This is going to be those that are in an Excel sheet or a worksheet. and it's going to look more like raw data. The HMIS programs one, these are going to be aggregate reports. This is where you're going to have calculated numbers. Usually they just take a minute or two to run, so they're going to run in screen. And they're going to look like a PDF. Okay, so this is going to be the one that's going to have client served 68, as opposed to a worksheet that has a list of all the clients that were served, which equals 68. In particular with this, we're going to be looking at the HUD data quality report. The HUD data quality report is just that. It is a report that looks at data quality issues across the specific time or program based off of the HUD logic and what they are looking for most basic reporting. Now, there could be stuff, especially like with RAI and HOPWA, that aren't included with this, but definitely for ESG, this is going to include a lot of those elements that are reported on. And again, it's more of the foundational piece of this. It's going to look at data quality issues across HUD logic. When you're doing this, we're going to select the data quality report. And you're going to select your date range. I know a lot of people like to run this monthly for the previous month to ensure that they have the data quality the data quality and stuff there. Some people will run it annually just to keep an eye on things, or quarterly. You can select the date that you want, and you can even select, a previously decided time period. It's up to you. For the purpose of this training, I'm going to run it for the last year because I've got some preloaded data in there. And you want to select the organization. So most people only have access to one, but what I recommend is, since this report is sensitive to security settings, you would, or like your security settings, you would want to make sure that, like, if you're running it for my sample org, that is what you are logged into, which I am. You can also select by program type. I don't recommend, and grant, I don't recommend selecting by grant just because typically it'll show up the same way. However, for a lot of HMIS data, or for all HMIS data, client enrollment is tied directly to the program table and not the grant table. So you are able to, just run it off of the programs, and you can, if you select both, it can kind of cause some gray funky areas with that, because it's trying to pull from two separate tables, and it's just cleaner that way, and an unnecessary step to tie in the grant. So I'm going to select just for our services only program, but I can run this for my whole sample org, for all the programs, or for a specific program type, or just for a specific program. And for that, that's what I'm going to do. Now, you do have the ability to search by state filter. If you had, or a COC filter, if you are one of those implementations that have multiple COCs that enter into one client track system. So, for instance, there is one state to where the whole state together has agreed to use the same implementation. So they have 12 different COCs that are entering into one. We are not that case. We are statewide and we have one COC. So naturally, everything is going to fall under South Dakota. You also have the ability to set up the Social Security masking. This will give the full Social Security number with all 9 digits in it. This one would have triple X's, and with the last 4 showing, or 6 X's, 5 X's, and the last 4 showing, and then this one would have that number blanked out completely for the export. I typically do the last 4 of the social just because it's going to give me enough to figure out what I need. Now, we are going to, if we select run this as a report, this is going to be the option that is going to pull down the data quality aggregate count, or that PDF, okay? And this is going to marry and match up to the export but it's going to be that PDF of a, clean picture that's going to show us what's there. And we have the the Q1, which is a validation table. That's just telling us all the data that are available in a synopsis of the data that is being pulled. So there were a total of 17 persons served. 13 of them were over the age of 18. 3 of them were under 18. 1 person is age unknown. We had 3 leavers. All 3 of those were adults. We had some stayers. 4 of them were vets. 2 were chronically homeless. And then we get down here, and we can see on Q2 that we have the PII. So of those 17 people that we served, we have 1 data quality issue for the name that's making up 5.88% of that error rate. We have 3 data quality issues where there's something wrong with the data. But we have 1 Social Security issue to where that client doesn't know or refusing that information. Okay. We have here, for instance, with date of birth, we have 1 where the client chose doesn't know or refused. Again, that may be legitimate, but HUD is still tracking these, as we can see, and none of the other kinds. For race, we have 1 that's a don't know, and 1 where that information is just not in the system. And we can see here, just how that's breaking down. And you can see here with the error counts as well.
And Tessa, the information when it has in the information missing column, that would be where somebody has chosen data not collected as the answer to a question.
It could, yes and no. So not solely, it can be that they've chosen data not collected, but it could also mean that for other reasons that data isn't present. So sometimes I've seen data information missing, and that enrollment was closed out early. So the workflow was closed out early, and that assessment there isn't one of that assessment tied to that report. Another instance where information may be missing is do you remember how and we're going to show this again in the export, do you remember how I was saying the date at the top of the page needed to match that enroll date? If those dates don't match, then that assessment's not tied to it. So that's going to be another instance where that data may show up as missing.
Okay, perfect.
And, again, you can see it here. This is just saying the error count. We go to the next page. This is going to have income at start, which is going to be income issues on an entry assessment. This is going to be income issues at annual assessment. This will also show up too if that annual was not done. That's usually a good indicator that an annual wasn't done. And then this is going to be the same, that there would be an issue with entry at exit. And this could be a couple of different things if the doesn't know, client refused, or data not collected were selected, or in like an instance of an annual, if it's not been done, it'll show up as missing, or if that date's off. We have no issues with chronic homelessness. And then the last 2 aren't used very much. So this is timeliness. This is telling us how often between the enroll date and the metadata of when we actually entered the data was done. So for example, if we did an enrollment on the 28th, and today is the day that we sat down and entered that enrollment into client track, it's going to show that that record was entered 2 days later. Whereas you can see here with a lot of mine with 11 and plus, because this is training data that I've made, some of these are going to be longer because, like I've backdated a lot of stuff. And this is done typically to show as a snapshot of the metadata available. And, like how often records get used and how often records are getting updated and used to kind of help with data quality. And then this last piece is for street outreach. And this would, and for bed nights, and this would be, like that doing that contact service or to doing a bed night in ESG or an emergency shelter. We're not covering that for here, but that is available there. But these are two that are less. These last two are two that are less used, whereas 2 through 5 are the biggies.
Okay. And I can tell you, this is Denise again. Before we kind of move off of here, I definitely look at the timeliness on your data quality report because it is required in our policies and procedures that data is entered within 5 business days. So if we see a lot of high numbers in the 11 plus days column, you'll definitely be getting an email from me just to remind you that, you know, data is required to be entered within 5 business days. Now, we do know some of this is going to come into play when maybe we have an agency that got awarded funding and getting everything set up, getting their training done, getting all that stuff. They are backdating, you know, some of the clients, especially with the CARES Act funding. We know that there's going to be some backdating happening. We absolutely understand that. That's something that I'm going to, you know, be contacting you on. But just know as your programs use the system, and that timeliness is definitely one of the things that I look at when I review your data quality reports. And I did type in the chat box as a reminder that agencies are required to submit quarterly reports to me. As the HMIS lead, I just have to keep track of that and just review that. And so really tracking, looking at your data quality on a monthly basis is really, really important for agencies to do. Just so at the end of a quarter, it doesn't get out of hand and you're not spending an entire week trying to fix data or figure out what's wrong with data. It's really helpful to do a lot of that on a monthly basis. And I think also in our HMS data quality plan, I think our percentage of error, I think the goal is to be less than 5% for an error rate. So just making sure that you're looking at those types of things.
Yes. Clearly, I'm going to be getting an email from Denise after this because I have 6 records of, I have like 50% of my data that's 11 plus days old.
Right.
Yes. Sorry about that, Denise. I've had other things going on. Now that we've gone over the aggregate, what I like to do is just minimize that and keep it hidden up here. And then you're going to run the export. And you're going to do that here. You can see that our settings were saved. And I'm going to select run the export. You have to, it's going to give you the option of encrypting it. This is what I strongly recommend because especially like, you know, where I'm doing it here in training, it doesn't matter as much because this is fake data. But when you're using it in live data, you're going to be exporting out something with a lot of PII in it. And this is just an added step of security, which, you know, you shouldn't be giving out your password, and no HMIS staff will ask for your password. We have enough passwords of our own. We can not keep up with them all. But it's an added level of security that in case somebody gets on your system, they're going to have to go through a little bit of an effort to get this off your computer. The password to set it up, it's still going to have, it's going to have to, you know, have a capital in it, a number, and some sort of symbol. And the other thing that I can tell you is that we cannot retrieve this password for you. So there is not a way, it is a security issue if I am able to like go in and read the script or the logic to find the password that you used. So if you can't remember this password and you don't have it anywhere, you're just going to have to rerun the report because you're not going to be able to access it again, okay?
And I think also kind of reminding users at this point, like this is a made up, you're just making up this password for this export. This is not your HMIS password. This is not, this is just a made up password for this particular export.
Yes.
Because I know I get a lot of questions from people on that too.
Yeah, so you could set up a unique password for this every time, or you could even use the same password for this each time. I won't know, and I can't know about that, but this is unique to you and you only, and unique to every time that you run an export, okay? Now, you are able to, because we are savvy like that, you are able to uncheck the encrypted option, but you have to accept full responsibility for that report. So what this is saying is that I'm accepting the responsibility to ensure that this is safely contained. To an email or like put it on social media or do anything like that because there's PII in it. Because when I select this, I'm able to just download that to my computer without having to put in the password. Okay. What you're okay to do, just understand, like you have two options with this. And, just understand the risk. And I just want to make sure that, you guys have all the information you need when you're making these choices. All right. Now, this is going to take us to files on server. And you can see here, I've done 2 data quality reports already, and they've pulled down. Typically with data quality reports, like you can see this one, I think that this one took maybe 8 minutes to download, and this one took 5 minutes to export. Depending on what's going on in the system or with the asynchronous task, it can take longer. And you can, if your report's not done yet or not showing up here, you can click the view and you can see the reports that have been ran or are about to run, okay? So you can see here, these are the 2 that I ran earlier, and this is the one that's running right now. And this is saying that, so like this one you can see ran in a minute, this one ran in 7 minutes. This one hasn't started yet, but this is the task ID. And we could cancel this if needed, but we're not going to. But the cool thing about this is that like if you don't see your report here and you click on this, you can see if it's not started yet, or if it's errored out, you can see that it's errored out and that you need to start it again, which is cool. Now, if you do get an error out, you can always put in a ticket to us and we'll help you with that. But just know that like you're able to check on that, which I think is really cool. And you can refresh it as well. Now, like I said, have already done an export for us. And this is what I do when I am doing an export is I will have a bunch of forms up that I have to minimize because it's the way I do things. And then I will create a folder on my desktop. To save it in. I've done this before. And this is just so like I can save them there. And then what I do is I choose to download it. And I'll open this. And I will save this or move it to my folder. And again, we're just doing this for testing purposes, just for this. But this will, like, if you're doing it for real, this just means like you've got a separate copy there. It's not a minute. I'll do that in a minute. But to just move it and save it there. But this is how it's going to look. And you can see here, as I pull this up, this is this is going to match with this. And you can see here that like we've got the 17, and like you've got the 17 and the 13 here, and so like these match, right? So these are meant to be used in tandem, which is really cool. And then And then if I go to the validation page, this is the data that makes up those. So you've got the data available that you can use. This is really cool because what you can do with this is like if you're if you're wanting to do analysis and stuff like this will give you an unduplicated report of the HUD data there, which is really cool for your program. And I use this a lot, like when I was old school and how to calculate the by name list by hand and stuff like that. There's some cool stuff that you can do with this. But the again, because that's a validation, that's going to be like all the data that report's made of. You are going to be able to you'll be able to see like that bucket of data that this report includes. Right. And then this is going to get, like, if you look at this, this is going to match up to this, and it's going to have the clients here that have that issue. And you're going to have the client ID, the name, and then as well as the data quality issue. So what I do is I copy this, minimize it, and then I go to the clients page. I search, and it's Charlie Moe. And I can see here that Charlie has a name issue. And if we go here to his profile and look at his history, see that his name's there, so what's going on, right? And if we go to his dashboard, can anybody see what the issue is here? Does anybody know why this is triggering an error? Because his name's in there.
I do.
I do too. It's because of the name quality. So this is getting triggered because of the name quality, because again, where it's partial first and partial last name, this will trigger an error. So in order to fix this, we would want to confirm that Charlie Moe is still his full name reported, and we can change that and then hit finish. All right. And it's going to take us on in the workflow, but we don't need that. Okay. This is the time too where I like to minimize the screen. So then let's go back to the report. And this is the other cool thing that I like to do. So if I refresh this, look at that. No more data quality error for name. Isn't that cool? I think it's cool. Again, little things like that excite me. So you can actually like do real-time data cleanup. Now, if I switch from a different work group or a different organization, this will not save. Like I'd have to rerun it, but again, it's going to take a minute or two. But you can see that like you can refresh it as you go. Okay. So let's do a couple more. We've got some social security numbers, and you can see here, this says that the rules do not match the Social Security Administration rules. And we have one that doesn't. So we're going to look at a couple of those. All right, so just going to do this again. All right, and then you can do it here. So for these, if that information were there, we could update that there. We're not able to see the full one. So you can still go into the enrollment, and we're going to edit project entry workflow. And you can see here that the full social was reported, but it does not match the naming convention or the coding conventions for that. So typically what this is going to have to be is like, it's going to be a different number. And usually what's going to trigger that is what this starts with. So I think it's got to be like a 409 or one of those to do that. So I'm going to update that on this record. And then again, once you've done with that, because you're updating the record, you don't have to go through the whole enrollment. You can change out. But just updating it for that is going to do that. Is going to change it. And then this is one where there's not an issue, there's not does not match that rule, but there's something else going on. So let's see what's going on there. Again, we're going to go to edit and workflow. All right. See, and the issue here is that client doesn't know. Okay, so this can be an instance where we found out their social security number and we can update that. We're going to say that that's it, but you can see once we do that, that question's going to go away and this is going to show us the full number reported. Excuse me, we can exit out of that. Once it's done, make sure you hit save and not do changes. Exit out. And then we have some others. So we have a date of birth issue. So let's go to this record. And this is how I just clean the data. I just go through and I look at what the errors are to see if I can fix them. All right. We're going to find our enrollment and edit that. And see, the issue with the date of birth here is that the client refused to give their date of birth. Okay. Now, if a client refuses, that's their right. They don't have to give you information and we will still provide them services. However, again, like this is something that HUD does flag and keep track of. Don't hate the messenger. This is what happens. This question comes up a lot for people is that, like legitimately people choose to just not report that. That's their right. HUD will still flag it as an error. And we can say here that in order to fix this, like she came back and was able to give us her full birth date. And we can put that in and that will update and then we can hit finish again to save it. And then exit out of the workflow when we're done. Okay. And you can see here, if we go to edit client, that her birth date is updated here. Right.
And I think the important thing to note here is the system allows us to be able to go back in and edit that workflow. So because there may be times where somebody comes into shelter or somebody comes into a domestic violence shelter, maybe all of that information can't be collected on the night they come in or, even the next morning right away or whatever. But as we gain their trust, as we work with them longer, sometimes we are then able to get more and more of that information so that we can go back in and complete that workflow.
Yes. So. Exactly. And this is going to be another one. So this one is an issue with race. And there's going to be some, just depending. See, I didn't make this client record, and this wasn't made by my organization, so I'm not going to see all of that. You can update that here, but, it's always a safe bet to be able to update it in that enrollment workflow. So I'm going to select the edit enrollment workflow again. And we can see data not collected was the option for race. And again, this is what's triggering that error. So we could update that. We're going to say that this person felt comfortable with this and updated it. But we can also see here, and this is what I do, is even though we were here for race, do you guys see there's other errors on this page? Right? So we can also update other errors and, just be cognizant of other errors that are there as well. All right. Do you guys have any questions about doing the DQ stuff? Do you all want me to show you how to do the others? Because it's pretty straightforward like that, and I can go in and show you some others as well with this.
I think one of the, we don't have any questions in the chat box at the present moment, but I do know one of the issues that I think we probably get more than any that I get questions from end users on is when there's issues in the income and sources.
Okay.
You know, that's probably one of our, and sometimes it's not necessarily that the data, maybe the data is there, but there's another issue with dates or with something like that in the assessment.
Yeah, so that's going to be
when we're working through backdating information and adding in old information.
Yeah, so that's going to be covered in D4. Do you want me to cover D3 or the Q3 first, the question 3 first, or do you just want me to skip over to 4 and come back to 3?
What's all the information in Q3?
It's going to be the universal data assessment.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're here. If you have it, we may as well look at it.
Okay. No, that's fine. I am here for you all. So if you want me to skip around or do whatever, I'm happy to do that. I just didn't know what you guys wanted. Because I planned on going through the whole data quality report. All right. Got an error somewhere. Hang on. Here we go. All right, so this is DQ3 or Q3, whatever you want to call it, and this is going to be issues with the data universal data assessment. These are going to be ones that can be fixed either under common assessments, under universal data. You would want to make sure that you're getting one that's tied to that enrollment. Or you can also go the same way as going back into that edit enrollment workflow to update this again. You have the option of doing both. I prefer doing edit enrollment workflow just because it's going to be like the most succinct way to, like, you're not going to have to go back and forth as much. So like for this one, you can see that the issues client refused. We have a head of household without location for some of these, and we have some that are just plain missing their disabling condition. So let's go to the veteran one first. It's aquamarine. And this time I'm going to go to the universal data assessment. You can see here that this 42920 is also this 42920, this entry assessment too. Okay, so it's the same one. But I'm going to go here and I'm going to see what the veteran status is.
Good boy.
Oh, we're going to have to go through the workflow. So let's go through the workflow to do this. And then edit entry workflow. And you can see here that that client refused is that, and so we would just have to update that to to change it to a yes or no. Now, if that's accurate, leave it as is, but it's still going to flag an error. Another common one is this head of household without location. So let's try this. Right. And then no changes. All right, so we can see here that client location isn't selected, right? So it's blank. And then we have here that the disabling condition is blank as well. So you can see on this one that Sirius had missing disabling condition, and there was an issue with that. So how to fix both of those, you're just going to put down the information that was available there, you know, that if you have it, And this one's going to be easy because, again, South Dakota is statewide, so you only have one option for okay? And see, this whole page wasn't done, so we're going to have to fill it out. This is an example of somebody that's had a record closed out early, and the pages were missing. So you can see here that there wasn't disabling condition. I had to fill out the 3.917 chronic homeless stuff, and that there's no income or there's no health insurance tied to it, you know, so I'd have to save that as well. Right. So that would be how you would fix those. Let's check for, so these are missing for disabling condition. We can go here and check some more. You know, again, we could probably, let's, oh, sorry. Go to universal data. Disabling conditions on that one. So let's go into the record. Just a lot of digging, guys, when you're doing these. It's, you know, you just kind of got to go through and find that item and see what's going on. Can anybody see what the data issue here is? So we have 7:30 services only, edit entry workflow. See, this one was already updated. It's going on to that. So we can change that and save. So, you know, like this is what we're gonna do with those. And then on 4, so then on number 4, this is going to be the validation one for income. And you can see here, like the ones that are going to have issues. So a couple of these, you've got income at start. So this means that it's going to be an income on a head of on an entry assessment. I'm gonna put this in here. And check this one. You can check it a couple of different ways. So like you can either come over here to financial assessments, sorry, financial evaluation. You can see edit income. See if there's any issues there. Then if there's not, you can go into enrollment. And then you'll just want to go to where the assessment is. All right, so see, this one was closed out, so there's missing information. Right? And you can see here, now that we've gone through that workflow, this is blank. This is why this record's triggering an error. See, there's no entry, there's no data associated to it. So then we've just got to fill it out. And again, use accurate data. I'm making this up because it's fake. But you know, you would want to make sure that you're putting in that data. And then we're going to close out when it's done. But you're going to do the same thing of going through the assessment, especially for the START assessments. You can use this You can use the edit entry workbook. That's going to be your best friend in doing this because it's going to give you all that data that was collected for that assessment. So I'm going to do it with this one as well. And then this one is blanket skin, so I'm just going to fill it out for the start. Right. Finish. And then this is the one, the annual one I wanted to show you all. So this is another one that comes up, and it's an income at entry. But you would want to put that in here and check it. And for the annual, and then, you know, again, you're not going to be able to use the action wheel to come in and find the review assessments for the annual. So what I do is I come over here to enrollments and services and master assessments, and this is going to have all the assessment types that this person has. And Jessica has one for one annual for our services only program, and we can review those related assessments, and we can see if what that looks like. Okay, and see if it's there. And we could go in here to update it. Right. Another common one that I see with this is if you check the annual assessments and there isn't one here, okay, then that would mean that you would want to go to the user dashboard and use this option to put that one in, okay? I think this is his issue. So he's been enrolled for 2 years and there's no master assessment, so, or no annual assessment. So you can see here, this would be an instance where we would need to go in and create an annual assessment for him and not collect the data, but just add the assessment total, the annual assessment total. Are there anything else, Denise, like with the assessments that, beside this, if you are selecting Medicaid, so like for, I saw the question that came up for the review assessments. Like, if this were in fact yes, and you did, if you wanted to, Denise, and you were saying, like, didn't you have something that you were saying because we had a question come in about putting 0 there? If you were recording that, if you have this selected, you do have to put a numeric value. Right. So you can't put in the, and I'm going to, can people mute themselves, please? So if this is something you are going to be collecting here, Denise, you want them to put 000s, right?
Well, I think that, so does it cause an error if they, because I think we might have a ticket submitted on this right now.
Okay.
Are we getting major feedback from somewhere, I think? If everybody can make sure to mute themselves. So if they do mark those 3 things that you marked right there, if they don't put a 0 in the amount, if they just leave the monthly amount column blank, does that cause an error in their export or their data quality?
Yeah, it will. So you would either have to put a 0 there, and we could check to see, depending on the report, we would have to check to see if that's going to pull in as an income. Sometime without like looking at the specifics, I don't want to say it will or it won't. But there is logic depending on what the issue. There is logic depending on the report and how it's being looked, and see whether or not that counts as income, or like how that's calculated.
I think the question that was submitted, or the ticket that was submitted, was from ICAP today. Okay. And we do have them in the chat box saying, so we have to put 0 in for Medicaid. Because a lot of times I know this question comes up, if we mark that they have Medicaid and Medicare, there's not necessarily a dollar amount monthly associated with that benefit. You know, it's a non-cash benefit, but if you mark that they have it, you have to put something. It's been my understanding that's always been the case, that you have to put something in that monthly amount column. Otherwise it would cause errors.
Yeah,
So.
it will. And we can look into it more, and this may be something like we need to look at off the call just to see if like we need to have that in to see, you know, I want to look at the specifics of that before I can give a final answer. But typically, you know, just for general HMIS, if you're going to put an amount like this here, you have to have a numeric value.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And I think I did assign that ticket to you, and they did supply attachments to that so that you can see that. So
perfect. I'm happy to look into it. Just the training today, this training today took up most of my time, so that was my preoccupation. I assure you I will get to it. But yeah, no, you would just go into here, and this is what you're wanting to look for. With these is you're wanting to look for client records. Like, you know, you would just want to go in and look at that financial, and especially like if there's not one here, like with this one, the reason why his is flagging as an error is because there just wasn't an annual done for him. Is there any other things, because I think we've got chronically homeless left, and we have no chronically homeless data samples that I made in this. But just so like you would know how to fix those, again, those are chronic homeless is only collected at entry. So you would be able to go in using that edit entry workflow, edit project entry workflow to update that and make changes. Is there anything else that, like, because this is kind of running into the end of what I have to show you guys, and I have some time built in for questions or show you other stuff that you want or need. Is there anything else that we want to talk about or any questions?
I was just looking in the chat box, and I can answer this question in the chat too, but for SNAP, we always have put in the zeros, I'm guessing, but for Medicaid, but not for Medicaid. But if that's the case, now we'll make sure we are going to do that going forward. And so my response to that is kind of how you just showed with refreshing that data quality report. So the client name, you guys have your export already, so pull that client name up, go in and make that change, adding the zeros into the Medicare, save it, go back to your data quality report and refresh it to see if it changes the amount of errors that are in that column. I mean, that'd be a really quick way to see if that makes a change in that data quality report.
Yeah, so
I like the way you showed those in tandem, where you showed the data quality report, and then you also have the export, so you can see the client name, go into HMIS, put that client name or number in there, however you prefer to do it, and make the change, save it, go back and refresh your data quality report. The number will change if it corrected the error.
Yeah, so you can see here we've collected quite a few of these errors, and our numbers have gone down significantly. You know, like there's none here, there's a data issue here, you know, but these are ones that we just didn't look at, which is cool to do. And you can also save this or export it out into an Excel, PDF, if you want to save that, like if you're going to send it to Denise.
And Dustin, we do have somebody else had typed in the chat box, and I've kind of answered this question before with some of our agencies, having a hard time pulling up my error download, which I'm assuming is their data quality export. My computer said it was corrupt and stopped it. So that's something with their system. If they have some type of security or some type of program on their system that stops that report, they have to change that in their system, I would assume, to allow that to happen.
Yes, ma'am. And what it is that a lot of firewalls and internet security stuff like that will sometimes flag your exports like this because it is a .x file, and .x files are one of the most common ones used to put viruses, harbor viruses. Now, this is from Client Track, and you're not going to get a virus from this. This is just because that .x file is the most common kind. And so, like, if you have sensitive security settings for that, it can trigger your spyware or your virusware on your computer for that reason. You are able to go in and put Client Track as an exception depending on your web browser or your virus protection, but you can also accept that download and turn it off if you need to.
Yep, and some other people are saying they had that happen too and had to call the tech and have them lift the protection for that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but that's common. I assure you, Client Track's not trying to give you a virus. It's just because this is a .x file, and that .x file is red flagged as like the most common. It just so happens to be the most common type that viruses are usually spread through. But again, Client Track isn't trying to give you a virus.
I don't have any other questions in the chat box for the recording part of this.
Well, does anybody else have any other questions? You know, you can unmute yourself and ask it if you want to. It's totally up to you all. I'm here for you. This is your time, so if there's something you all want to say or me to show you or ask, I'm more than happy to help if I can.
Don't see anything coming over the chat box. Okay, nope, I don't see anything or anybody. Doesn't sound like it's unmuting to ask a question.
Okay. Well, if you guys think of anything later, I'm more than happy to answer them. You can submit a ticket, and you know, I'm happy to help you guys in any way that I can.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. I think everybody, Dusty, are you done with everything that you need to do?
Yep, that's all that I had. Thank you guys for having me and spending the afternoon with me.
Yep, and I agree. Thanks everyone for your time. We appreciate it. And definitely after this is over, we're going to hope to put the recording up on our YouTube channel. So as soon as we have that all done, I'll send out a notice to everybody just so they know it's there and they can access it if they need to. So reach out if you need anything, and thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your evening, I guess, and the rest of the week. Happy July.
Thank you guys. I appreciate your time and have a good night.